of the toxic online influencer Anonymous. I'm looking up, but my little toddler fingers can't reach the keyboard. Which is the logical reason why we had to spend the whole of season 12 getting you to chew up spiders.
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Dustin Jackson.
Dustin, welcome to season 13 of the Kongversation. It's nice to have you on board yet again.
Oh, it's nice to be here. I like what you've done with the place.
Well, actually, you did it. You were the one who did the album artwork and like kind of aesthetic design for this season. So I love what you've done with the place, Dustin.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Hyle. You know what? I'm pretty happy with it as well. And if you're happy with it, I'm even more happy with it.
I am happy with it. I paid you the commission for it, and I said, I'm giving you this money because I'm happy with it.
That was a good transaction. That's a peek behind the curtain, behind the scenes, at how doing work for someone works.
And now you have a little money in your pocket, and if it hasn't gone to rent or food, you might have a little bit to go towards the Switch 2. Yes, the Switch 2. We are in the midst, Dustin, of Switch 2 hype season. After what seems like just unyielding years of rumors, leaks, and most importantly, shitty clickbait, the Switch 2 is about to be properly unveiled by Nintendo with a direct on April 2nd, which, the day after April Fool's Day.
You know, all those people who say, if the Nintendo Switch is so good, why did they never make a Nintendo Switch 2? Shut them right up.
That's right, but if the Nintendo Switch 2 is so good, why did they start with the Nintendo Switch? Why did they just bring out the Switch 2 first?
Yeah, that's true. Why do you have to shit the mistake out and make us pay for it, Nintendo? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. Now, as far as new Nintendo consoles go, though, I have been around the block. I have been ridden hard throughout my life, Dustin. I remember when the Super Nintendo Entertainment System was coming out in the West. So I have been conscious of every single new Nintendo console post NES. And this time around, this feels a lot more low pressure, almost less consequential, in my opinion, because this time around, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the games library of the Switch, and we've got the Nintendo Switch Online service all carrying over. So this feels like more of just a lateral move, like you would going from a new PlayStation, from the old PlayStation, or a new Xbox from the old Xbox. Like, for the first time since Nintendo has had digital storefronts, this new console just feels like the next step, an evolution, rather than starting all over again from scratch.
I'm so glad I couldn't take another console's life cycle of, and here's your big release today. It's Super Mario Brothers. Yeah.
Time to buy it again, you dipshits.
You literal sheep flocking to our releases.
Yeah, but evolving from the Switch to the Switch 2. Evolution, Dustin, it's an important notion for this episode because
it's the Pokemon episode.
Yeah, no, we're talking about apes.
Oh shit, I have my notes wrong.
Even though we knew that January 16th of this year was going to be a big day for Donkey Kong fandom with the release of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. What was not known ahead of time was that we would then have to reckon with something on that very day that had wider, more impactful implications for the series going forward than merely a belated re-release of a 2010 classic. And I'm not trying to downplay Returns HD. I love Returns HD. I have been playing it daily since it's come out. I think it's great. Matt thought it was great. Some people might disagree with our take. We said it was the definitive edition, and some people said, actually, how could it be definitive if it had these flaws? And I'm like, well, out of the 3 versions we've got, it's the version I want to play the most. So that's what I meant by definitive.
Do you want to know my opinion on it?
You haven't played it.
I haven't played it yet, but I did pick it up last week.
Okay.
So, first step done.
But I did see a commercial for it, so I'm pretty much the expert.
I saw it on TV and considered it.
So, yeah, I'm not trying to downplay Returns to HD, but what also broke on January 16th, I think, could be a portent for Donkey Kong's future in a way that goes far beyond the recent past or the last decade and a half. Because when Nintendo properly announced the Switch 2 on January 16th, and look, everybody knows this, I just have to set the stage. All right, I know I'm not breaking any new ground here.
What? There's a Switch 2 coming?
Yeah, everybody listening to this has seen this. I am just trying to get everyone in the mood. This is foreplay, okay?
Right, I'm shivering from listening to it.
Right, when I say I was ridden hard, there's a reason I got rode so hard, because I incorporated foreplay.
That's why you're the master of setting the stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, they showed a brief snippet from the new console Mario Kart game. And by the way, Dustin, can I just say we predicted it? We predicted on our New Year's forecast, new Mario Kart game launching with the system.
Did we? That feels like a lifetime ago. That feels like a million years ago, but we're usually right about everything we say, so I believe it.
In my show notes today, I do say at one point, I was completely wrong about this, so maybe save your praise there.
50-50.
No, there's a new console Mario Kart game, the first time in 11 years. Holy shit. And in the crowded field of drivers, amongst the riffraff of Mario nonsense, was our old pal Donkey Kong, but with a new design that hewed closely to the way he looked in the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, your goodness. It appears that Nintendo is implementing the design in the video games. But Dustin, I ask you this. What came first? The movie or the design itself?
That's such a good question that I'm flabbergasted to even give you an answer.
Why? Why are they doing this now? Right in the middle of when Nintendo and Universal are doing an international theme park rollout that heavily features the old design of DK.
I don't know.
I don't know either. And what does this mean for the future of Donkey Kong, the Donkey Kong Country characters, and Rare's enduring legacy in the DK series?
Oh my goodness, Hyle. I don't know. I'm filled with so much fear of the unknown. A brave new world.
Well, calm your jangled fandom nerves, Dusty, because DK Vine and the Kongversation are on the case. Because on this episode, we need to talk about Donkey Kong's new design.
We need to do this.
We have to get it out.
No more conversations, no more DK Vine posts. It was just going to gum up the works.
We are getting into the nitty gritty, and hopefully we're going to calm more than your nerves, Dustin. Hopefully we're going to calm everybody down about this just a little bit, because I think we have some soothing sage wisdom to share on this episode. But before we get into it, I would like to quickly plug DK Vine on Twitch and YouTube. So we've got a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/DK Vine. We stream 2 to 3 times a week. I mean, we're not always on there because we're busy with other stuff. I'm busy with other stuff across the DK Vine multimedia empire. I can't be, streaming games 8 to 12 hours a day, but we try to make time for it.
We try our best.
We have our weekly Sea of Thieves streams on Sundays. We have the Idaho crew, which is you. It's now Cameron. It's Adam and Andrew. It's sometimes Tate.
Sometimes. Every now and then he makes a special guest appearance.
You do that Tuesdays. And then Wednesdays, I do DK Vine Done Slow, where I play games from the DKU very, very, very slowly. And it's usually just 2 hours of me talking about the lore, the implied lore, the history of the game, while I play the game very poorly because I'm distracted talking about the lore, the implied lore, the history behind the games. And then I'm like, oh no, I just hit that sneak. Oh no, that naughty just walked right into me. Oh no, that gruntling just walked into me. Oh no, I fell off that ledge.
And here's why that's a good thing.
So be sure to subscribe to us on Twitch. We're also on YouTube. I am working right now on what I'm hoping will be my magnum opus, my ultimate breakdown, my ultimate explanation of what the DKU is. It's the lengthiest video I've ever done. I have put so much of my heart, my soul, my bodily fluids into this. Just gallons of juice from yours truly.
I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait, especially the bodily fluids part.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you where the bodily fluids show up. That's going to be a delightful little treat.
We want it to be a surprise. You can't just spoil us.
But we also put up VODs of old streams on YouTube. Of course, the Kongversation is also available to listen on there. And, once I'm done with this video, I'm going to be hopefully rolling out lots of different style videos throughout the rest of the year. So subscribe to us on YouTube, dkmine.com/YouTube. Well, works the other way around too, whatever. Also, we are on TeePublic. We got our merchandise shop there. And we just talked about the new Kongversation album artwork for this season, Dustin. You can get that on a t-shirt. You can get that on a t-shirt with or without the Kongversation logo. Because, as I said last week, it's a very striking image. And I thought, this might actually be more popular if I don't put the Kongversation logo on it. Because it just works by itself. So,
just have it be a cool design on its own.
That's right. So you can get it with or without the Kongversation logo in either black or white at dkmine.com/merchandise. And all the proceeds go to you, Dustin, for that one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so
that's considerate.
If you want Dustin to be able to afford a Switch 2 or, I don't know, pay rent, eat, whatever Dustin does with the money, then be sure to buy a shirt.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't get a Switch 2, that's on each and every one of you, I guess.
Yeah, think about that. Why don't you?
Yeah,
faithful
guess
audience.
you should have bought a shirt.
Well, if you want me to buy a Switch 2, because I'm not going to get a cut of Dustin's shirts, but I am mostly funded by the Patreon. It's how I keep our server cost paid for, how our expensive firewall that keeps out the AI bots that would take us down otherwise. That's how I pay for that. Just basically our Patreon is the lifeblood of DK Vine. So if you like the Kongversation, you like what we do, think about becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month. dkvine.com/Patreon. And one of the perks of our Patreon is we do live stream these episodes for our $5 and up patron tier. So hello to Andre and hello to Porygon Q who have joined us on this. It's a very stormy evening where I'm at. So thank you for coming in out of the wet dew of the first day of spring is when we're recording this.
It's not stormy here where I am, but it is just kind of like a little cloudy, like just an uninteresting weather today.
Yeah, it's been a long, cloudy winter, so I'm really looking forward to being a long, cloudy spring.
Me too.
But, we're going to bring the sunshine with this episode because, Dustin, it's funny. You know what's funny?
What's funny?
As an overworked, underpaid, constantly stressed out Donkey Kong journalist, early January was even more tiring than usual. And
that is funny.
Yeah, I know. That's with the Kongversation being in its between season hiatus. Because everybody was saying to me during this time, not everybody, few people, but, I exaggerate. Everybody was coming up to me on the street, tears in their eyes, saying, sir. No, they were saying, I hope you're enjoying your vacation, Hyle. And I'm like, what vacation? I'm not doing the Kongversation. I'm still doing DK Vine. I'm still working 7 days a week, trying to work on videos, doing news articles. Like, I'm spinning a lot of plates right now. I'm just not doing the podcast. But it was stressful for me, even with the podcast temporarily off my plate, because early January, I had to chase or just regurgitate loads of Donkey Kong related stories during that time. I mean, it was the hype cycle for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. There was all of the errant theme park business still lingering. And then we had all the new merchandise Nintendo and Nintendo's licensees were starting to roll out related to the Donkey Kong brand. So that was where all my attention was. To speak nothing of the occasional Yooka-Replay story or whatever Playtonic was doing. Dunk, perchance. But for the rest of the online gaming world, specifically the Nintendo adjacent section of the online gaming world, all they wanted to talk about was the Switch 2.
Ugh, I thought we were over the Switch 2.
Not even discussing like Switch 2 games, like speculating what games we might see, which is what would be interesting to me if I had the bandwidth to even think about the Switch 2 at that time. But it felt like all of the stories were just chasing very, very dry technical spec leaks that were coming from third-party accessory manufacturers. So you would be getting all of this clickbait. I mean, just a constant deluge of Switch 2 stories about, oh, here's how the Switch 2's dimensions might possibly differ ever so slightly from the Nintendo Switch. And look, there's obviously some market for that kind of stuff. They wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't. It wouldn't be clickbait if it didn't work, right? So,
right.
I understand there's a lot of people who find that stuff interesting, but it's the sort of thing that, personally speaking, I've always found as dull as doing math homework. It's a very clinical sort of way of looking at games, and it's the kind of thing that DK Vine, especially under my, editorial stewardship, I've never really been about. I've always been about chasing the feeling of how you felt when you played a video game as a kid, and just kind of that magic, that getting lost in a world that's coming alive on the screen in front of you. And I've never really been that fascinated by just the technical nitty-gritty of what makes that all possible, if that makes any sense.
Right. Like where I'm at with the Switch 2 is it looks like it's going to be the Switch, but more powerful. Like, I don't really care about anything else because I know it's pretty self-explanatory what it's going to be. I just want to see the games part of it.
Yeah, like I said, different strokes for different folks, but it's not like when the Nintendo 64 was new and you saw it for the very first time and you're like, holy shit, that thing looks like a claw. Or if I was slightly older, I'm sure I would have been said, oh my god, it's a triple-pronged butt plug.
I'm sure more than one person said that.
I'm sure more than one person has used it for that.
But did they express their excitement?
We didn't have clickbait back in 1995, 1996, so I can't really say for sure. But I feel like the overall takeaway is, as you said, the Switch 2 is just sort of the Nintendo Switch, but bigger and more powerful.
Right, which is good. I like that it is that, but
I wouldn't want it to be anything but that.
Yeah. But to me personally, that's like anything beyond that, I'm not that interested in.
Yeah. So that being said, we would get these outlets, and this is me exaggerating again, but I would feel like there'd be YouTube channels uploading 3-minute long videos about potential button layouts every 15 minutes, or the same articles being run on a daily rotation, and just like, oh, this third party Nintendo sleeve manufacturer accidentally uploaded this sketch of what might be the Switch 2 to investors.
And yep, it looks like a Switch.
Yeah. Oh, but it's a couple inches longer this way.
No way.
And yeah, whatever. Like I said, there's a market for that. There's people interested in that. But meanwhile, I'm over here, my little lonely corner, trying to keep everyone focused on what was Donkey Kong's biggest moment, like, under the sun in years. Like, the spotlight was on Donkey Kong, but it felt like nobody was interested in that. They were just chasing the most boringest of all Switch 2 stories. And,
right.
Yeah, so I was perturbed by that. I was like, yeah, we got all this Donkey Kong stuff happening. Why are we talking about something that might not even be announced, in the next week or two? And, I'm the DKU guy. That's where my interests lie. That's where my website is focused on. And having a news cycle completely dominated by the breathless speculation about shoulder buttons of the Switch 2, I don't know. It was just like, I'm glad we exist. I'm glad DK Vine exists, because it does feel like, otherwise, I wouldn't have anything interesting to read right now pertaining to video games.
Right. Like, people who are interested in that stuff, like, obviously nothing wrong with that. I just could not fake the enthusiasm for this is the Switch 2's L button.
Tomorrow, we're going to show you the R button.
No way. Set your alarms.
So, because I was getting agitated by this, it was chafing me badly. I was also hoping that the much rumored announcement of the Switch 2 wouldn't be coming until, like, at least a week after Returns HD came out. Like, give it a little bit of space. Give it a little bit of breathing room. And
right.
I'm like a lonely little shepherd on a hill trying to, get the flock to go into the Donkey Kong pen, and everybody else is just like, Switch 2 pen over here. It's much more spacious, and it's got this lovely little bit under the shade where you'll have more comfort. And I'm just like, oh, but the Donkey Kong pen, come on.
Come on, guys.
And as I extensively detailed to Matt on the previous episode of the Kongversation, I arose the morning of January 16th with nothing but DKC RHD on the brain. And I went out to get the game, came back early to mid-morning with it in my hand, ready to go, ready for a fruitful, productive day of doing nothing but Returns HD articles, maybe even streams. Like, I was ready to go. But instead, I get on my computer and I'm greeted with the bombshell release of a Switch 2 teaser trailer by Nintendo. My heart sank, Dustin. I was like, oh, come on. Today of all days.
You were this close to doing a Professor Chops video highlighting all his good points and how cool he is, but that had to go out the window when you saw this.
Yeah, I don't even know when I'm going to get to that. Maybe when the Switch 3 is gearing up, I'll finally get around to that Professor Chops
We're
video.
going to have to just punt it down the line a little further.
So, yeah, of course I had to then sit there and watch the Switch 2.
I'm just picturing you with your arms folded.
Oh yeah, I was
folded.
I was making the pouty face. I was just like, fine, whatever.
More Nintendo.
Let's get it over with. And the first bit of it was just the boring system shots, the button porn, the stuff that had been leaked quite extensively. And it's just like, yeah, okay, right. Well, there it is.
There it is.
The thing I was both surprised about and honestly pleasantly pleased with was that it was just called the Switch 2.
Yeah. Not trying to be like the Nintendo way yahoo.
Yeah, I mean, I think they learned their lessons with the Wii U. Hopefully, like, Switch 2 communicates everything you need to know. You don't need to be more fanciful with it. So,
right.
You know what you're getting with the Switch 2. But the last little bit of it showed off the first new console Mario Kart game in 11 years, as I said. It was a Route 66 inspired track, like a desert highway, like 60s Americana. You got the diner in the background. And in the track, amongst all the Mario Kart stalwarts like Mario, Luigi, Peach, Bowser, Yoshi, Wario, I think Waluigi was there, maybe. I don't
so.
I don't care. Was Donkey Kong. But it wasn't Donkey Kong as we have grown accustomed to him looking as he has in Mario Kart over the last 11 years of Mario Kart 8 permutations and Mario Kart
Thank
Tour
God.
even. It wasn't even a Donkey Kong as he's looked per se over the last 30 years. No, this was a Donkey Kong who looked remarkably like he did in the Super Mario Brothers movie. And for those of you who have not seen the Super Mario Brothers movie, who set that one out and just decided to go on a media blackout from 2022 to today, I just like, I don't want anything to do with that. I really can't stand Chris Pratt. I Seth Rogen ran over my grandma. I don't want anything to do with it.
You think you would have seen that in the news?
The news is just falling apart. The 3 billionaires own all the news, Dustin. Stuff doesn't get
You're
reported.
right. They're not interested. They're not interested in reporting on Seth Rogen running over a grandma.
So it's my favorite Easter song, by the way.
Seth Rogen ran over your grandma.
So, Dustin, you are an artist extraordinaire.
Oh, thank you, Hyle.
So, I would really like to pick your brain for a second and describe to the people how Donkey Kong Super Mario Brothers movie design, which we're just going to call the movie design from here on out, because I'm not going to say that full title again and again and again. How would you describe it as differing from what is thought of as the Kev Bayless / rare design of Donkey Kong that's more or less been the standard since 1994, since late 1994 when it debuted in Donkey Kong Country?
So I think the big things are mainly the brow. The brow is thinner. He doesn't have a perpetually angry expression. Well, his eyes in general are bigger too. Like modern DK's eyes are pretty small, but you look at movie Donkey Kong, they're pretty tall. Those are some tall eyes.
Tall eyes. Yeah, like I would just like to say I don't think the idea that the Kev Bayless / rare Donkey, we're just going to call it the rare Donkey Kong. I don't think this notion that the rare Donkey Kong is always looking angry is necessarily true. I think there's a reason that misconception is in people's brains, which we'll get into in just a bit. But I will agree he looks he can look a little bit more neutral or passive.
He looks a little friendlier.
His cheeks are rounder. For sure.
Yeah.
And as you said, the brow is thinner and it's definitely raised. It's not as curved on the top as the rare design. And the eyeballs are bigger. And also, I think his body shape is just generally thicker. The rare design is a little leaner, maybe a little bit more muscular in tone, while this one, he's more of a hairy bear daddy. Like I don't mean like a Banjo or a Bazaar or a Brash or Bramble or Blue or a Benny or Bjorn or a baffle or a bachelor. I mean bear in the parlance of a big, hairy, like manly man who might have a bit of a dad bod, but he's got this innate sex appeal that people can't resist.
I mean, I have to resist. I'm just trying to hold it in looking at this DK design right here.
Yeah, he's definitely thicker, we'll say. He's a little pudgier, and he's almost like a... There's a more ball-like quality, like a big, like, squishy, hairy ball that you might be able to... Like, I don't know. I feel like with the rare Donkey Kong, there was, like...
A little leaner.
Little leaner, a little meaner. While this one looks like he hasn't worked out for a bit, and he's maybe he's hitting middle age, and he's just letting himself go a little bit. But
right, trying to take it a little easier.
Yeah, so this was the design they rolled out in the Super Mario Brothers movie, and at the time Miyamoto said when they were showing it off, it's the first time we've redesigned Donkey Kong since Donkey Kong Country. And yeah, we were like, okay, well, Miyamoto is more involved with this movie. Maybe they wanted to do something different. They thought that this design would work better in a cinematic setting, but it doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be the status quo going forward as far as the games go.
Right. Like, there's kind of a degree of separation between movie and game usually.
Yeah, and it's not like the rest of the cast in the movie didn't have slight tweaks to the redesign. Mario is a little bit different. Bowser looks a little bit different. But Donkey Kong was the most dramatic of them all. And so we see Donkey Kong in these crowd shots, and of course, it was just me on my computer hitting print screen as much as I could on the YouTube video, trying to get as many different shots of him unobscured as possible, because you do want to see the full range of facial expressions. And, we didn't see much. He's kind of got a straight on stare, which actually helped line it up pretty well with the initial shot shown when they were revealing the movie design. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, they do look very similar there. I would say the Donkey Kong in the upcoming Mario Kart, he looks a little bit more squished, like a little bit more exaggerated than even movie DK does, but it's hard to see. It's really hard to tell and really hard to ascertain too much from this because... One, like characters always look a little bit different in Mario Kart, and also we just don't have a lot of high quality front and center shots of him. So
right, we have some shots, but he's pretty far in the back, not like perfect quality. So it's a little hard to form like a super solid opinion on it right now. Yeah.
Like there's one shot of him kind of like pursing his lips a little bit, like. Ooh, and that's the noise he's gonna make in Mario Kart for the Switch 2. By the ooh, you pass him and he's just like gone as the. It's just ooh.
I don't much care for getting hit by that blue shell.
He's been to Hollywood and he's all refined now.
It changes people.
It does. By the way, hello to those who have joined us in the live stream. We've got Giga Strike. We've got Me Muppet. We've got Freezer. Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Freezer is upset that I'm not making a Cars reference because I've been saying Route 66 and Freezer says, say Radiator Springs. And I'm like, well, I'm going to say what it's actually based on, not the thing that was based on the thing.
You think this is some sort of cartoon?
Right. This is real life. Okay?
Donkey Kong is real. Living cars are pretend.
Hollywood's a real place. Donkey Kong's been to Hollywood. Ergo, Donkey Kong is real.
That's just facts and logic right there.
This is the logic train. That's what we're riding today. So there were some initial theories as to what was happening before, when news is hot and heavy, when it's just rolling in, it takes a while to actually process and to actually use logic. And your brain is trying to rationalize your new state of being. And it feels like we had 3 primary theories bouncing around in the hours after the switch to trailer. Theory the first, Dustin. Everyone actually, if you look closely, has a new design in this Mario Kart game. And it's supposed to pay homage to the original Super Mario Kart artwork. And so therefore, everybody's jumping the gun. Donkey Kong doesn't really have a new design. It's just aping the way Donkey Kong Jr. looked in that game. I saw that in the immediate hours after. And, there might be a little bit of truth to the way the characters look, but I think it's a wild stretch to say that about Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I don't think he really looks like how DK Jr. looks in that game at all.
And, Mario is still recognizably the same Mario design we've had for years.
Yeah. No one else got a drastic overhaul to their design. I do think they, for the most part, look better. Like Bowser looks a lot better than he did in 8. You don't get a great shot of everybody, but even Mario himself looks nice. He's nice and squash and stretchy.
Yeah, he's a jelly tube now.
They took all his bones out.
Finally.
This is Mario for 2025.
Mario is going boneless in 2025, everyone.
The latest trend.
No, I do like the way Bowser looks. He looks a little more frightening, a little bit. Like, it looks a little bit less like a goofy bozo.
Yeah, and when comparing the designs, Bowser in Mario Kart 8 just looks so... The way I described him was bee-stungy. He's very bloated in the face.
Bee-stungy is my favorite Yooka Playley character. No, can I just say, this might be controversial. I don't care.
Okay.
It's not as controversial as a lot of the shit going around the internet these days. I don't like the way most of the characters look in Mario Kart 8.
Me neither. Like, even you brought up Donkey Kong earlier. I don't think he looks good in Mario Kart 8. That's probably one of my least favorite DK designs.
Honestly, some of the games that Donkey Kong has looked the absolute worst in over the last 30 years have been Mario Kart games.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think later in my notes, I describe it as a perpetual gooning face.
I hate that.
Well, now you're going to be thinking about it every time you play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
I'll be playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with friends, and I'll say, "Oh yeah, that's DK's gooner face. Don't worry about it."
You know that's what Candy has to see.
It's specifically the animation where he opens his mouth and goes, "Ah."
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like. He looks gross. I like the way Funky looks. Diddy looks all right, but like that initial
Diddy
batch,
just kind of looks like Diddy to me, but yeah, DK himself.
That initial batch of like 2014 designs, yeah, I'm not crazy about them, but that was the first theory. I disagree with that theory. I see where people are trying to take it, but I think it's taking what's happening with the other characters and misapplying it to Donkey Kong. That's not what's happening with Donkey Kong here.
Right.
Now, a theory I posited in my news article, because I was just like saying, we don't know. We don't know at this point, was that similar to Mario Kart Tour, there might be character variants or even skins. And what we're actually seeing is the Hollywood Donkey Kong skin. And, because one of the surprising things that we didn't get during Mario Kart Tour and the release of the Super Mario Brothers movie was more tie-in with that. I thought we would be getting Cranky Kong added to the game. I thought we might be getting some movie variants of the characters, but we never did. And, that's not really Nintendo's thing. That's more like Mortal Kombat, maybe. But, Street Fighter, the movie, the game, that sort of thing. So, like, we didn't get that with Mario Kart Tour. But I was thinking, it's a new game, new development ethos. We might be getting that. But the more I thought about it, I was like, but they wouldn't be showing that off in the trailer.
Why would Donkey Kong be the only one with a skin in this trailer?
Yeah, somebody hit the wrong button and they picked the wrong Donkey Kong. It wasn't Luigi with the big sausage either. I checked. I looked at Luigi's sausage front and back and I couldn't see it.
We measured it.
That was a theory I put out there, but even I didn't really believe that one. And the third theory, the correct theory, Dustin, is that Nintendo updated Donkey Kong's design.
I guess that was the one it turned out to be.
On some level, we were just in denial. But I think a lot of us were starting to suspect that something was up a few days prior to this. Because a few days before the Mario Kart trailer, before the Switch 2 trailer, the 2026 Donkey Kong calendar was solicited by Nintendo calendar publisher Harry N. Abrams. Gigastrike mentioned that they joined the live stream when I said Harry Ball. Well, there's another Harry for you, but this is Harry N. Abrams.
That's two Harrys.
The publisher behind all of the Nintendo calendars. You see a Mario calendar, you see a Zelda calendar, you see an Animal Crossing calendar. Harry and Abrams are behind, at least in the Americas, at least in our neck of the woods.
North American Nintendo calendar rights.
Central America, maybe even South America. But yeah, like they're the ones behind. Maybe it's the English language ones. I don't know. But this is the first new Donkey Kong wall calendar since 2021. And that was a couple years after they finally disentangled the Donkey Kong merchandising rights from the Super Mario merchandising rights. So if you wanted to use Donkey Kong imagery that wasn't directly related to Super Mario, like here's Donkey and Diddy with a basketball in their hands or something, you would have to license Donkey Kong as a brand and use the Donkey Kong logo. And I mean, it was a big deal when it happened. And I was very excited because it's like, this was shortly after, just putting out the timeline for people, this was shortly after the Vicarious Visions game fell through. And stuff started happening with Donkey Kong behind the scenes that, like, we were chasing a DK Vine, and I was just like, what's this then? And it actually led me down the rabbit hole to finding out through sources what was actually happening with Donkey Kong at the time. But we finally got a Donkey Kong calendar, and it was mostly just renders from Returns, Tropical Freeze, a render from Jungle Beat, and one render from DK Jungle Climber, which was the K. Rool artwork from the game, because it's the most recent K. Rool render from the Donkey Kong series. Therefore, it was the only way they could incorporate K. Rool into the calendar was to use the Jungle Climber render. Otherwise, you have to go all the way back to the Rare era, and I don't think they have enough high-res assets of those saved to satisfy Harry N. Abrams.
And even if they did, like, that would just stick out like such a sore thumb next to all the other Donkey Kong character renders that have had the chance to be updated over the years.
The Jungle Beat render alone sticks out like a sore thumb. It was just because the Jungle Beat render just looks so totally different from the retro era renders. But yeah, we didn't get one after that. It was just like, well, yeah, there's no more art assets to use. They ran out.
We did them all.
We're going to have to wait until we get a new game, apparently. But this new calendar instead incorporates brand new 2D art from Shigesa Nakawe. I'm terrible with names, but he's the artist extraordinaire for Nintendo, does all the 2D artwork of the Mario and now Donkey Kong cast.
I've never had to say his name out loud.
It sucks, doesn't it? It sucks. It sucks when you have to say something out loud that you never read.
Yes, I feel like I've had that like 3 times in the last like week.
Yeah. So say Nakoe? Well, knock on wood. But it's by him, or at least inspired by his house style. I don't know if he's got like any ghost artists, because you have to do quite a bit, but maybe does. But the cover of this Donkey Kong calendar, Dustin, was an immediate red flag that something was up. And what was up was his brow. His brow was up. He had a prominent raised brow, is what I'm just trying to say.
Oh, now I get it.
Yeah. So, like, looking at this, because it's Donkey Kong with a toothy grin, but a happy toothy grin, which is new. We haven't seen Donkey Kong with maybe it's to your point, what you were trying to say earlier, that Donkey Kong always seems angry in the rare design. I don't think it's the rare design, because there's definitely renders. And most often than not, during the rare era, the renders would look happy of Donkey Kong, happy and laid back.
Right.
I think what and a lot of people are saying is angry is when they put the toothy grin, the giant chompers, the big white teeth into the rare design. It doesn't really mesh right. So you don't really know what he's feeling a lot of the time. He's angry. He's hungry. I don't know.
Well, just to clarify, I don't think he always looks like he is pissed off all the time. I just mean more his brow is down. And they just rarely seem to deviate from that most of the time. And it's fine. It's worked fine. But that's not really what they're going for with the movie design or the Mario Kart design.
Yeah.
Even just looking at this first page of the calendar, his brow is down in that classic default Donkey Kong face. You know he's not angry, he's smiling. Look at him. But he doesn't get to do a lot of eye emoting very often.
Yeah, it was the brow's always kind of been fixed a little bit. And
yeah.
So on the front of this calendar, it's like a big announcement almost. It's like, hey, look at what Donkey Kong can do now.
Get a load of this shit.
And so people saw this, and a lot of people were like, oh no, they have reverted to the arcade era design. And I was like, I don't know, because as you said, you look at the January page in the calendar, which is the only 2 pages we've seen thus far. And it's the same design, but the brow is down and he looks just normal almost. Like he looks like the standard 2D art we've been seeing of Donkey Kong for years now under this style.
Yeah, that's where people kind of lose me. There's some changes here and there, but I don't think I don't look at this and say, "Oh, they're done with Rare's Donkey Kong design," because it still looks just like him.
Yeah,
there's just some tweaks here and there.
It's shocking to see him with a raised brow, but it's just because we haven't. It's like, oh, he can do that now?
He can use his eyes to emote. And it's not like they never could do it before, or it's not like they never ever did, but it's very rare when they are able to use his brow for acting.
Yeah. So I think what this design really is just a greater degree of flexibility and maybe a little bit more of a cartoony flourish to it.
Yeah.
It's really a little bit more fluid than it used to be. And yeah, his body shape is thicker, as I said, but I think generally this is just a little bit more of an expressive Donkey Kong. So when he does pull off certain facial expressions, it doesn't look like he's on hour 9 of an all-night Goonathon.
And you know what? If he wants to go to hour 9, good for him. if he wants to,
DK Vine done slow, am I right? So, anyway, later that day, later on the 16th, we're still on January 16th here, I started writing another article because a new line of Donkey Kong merchandise was rolling out. Initially only available in Nintendo stores in Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto, but would then become available elsewhere around the world on various websites and in Nintendo physical storefronts in the days and weeks to come. Just new shirts, new jackets, new little keychain clip things, just a lot of new Donkey Kong stuff hitting the stands to, at the time, I thought tie in with Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, made me ride some of the momentum from the theme park. But as I was writing this article, Dustin, it hit me. And I did a little bit digging through DK Vine's own news articles, through the extensive archives we have cultivated. I could just pull up old articles and reference stuff in the click of a finger. And that's when I realized, oh shit, this new design is the new design. It's here to stay. And it's been right under our noses for a few months now.
Say what?
The new merchandise rolling out on January 16th already reflected it, but there had been merchandise going back all the way to September 2024 that reflected it. We just didn't know because Donkey Kong was pulling off such a wild expression. It was a tote bag, a reusable tote bag that went on sale on Nintendo's Japanese merchandise site in September of last year. It's a yellow reusable plastic tote, and there was an image of Donkey Kong on the front eating bananas, just going to town on some on some yellow bee, and he's got the new design on there, but we couldn't tell at the time because he just looked like he was in a state of orgasmic bliss eating these bananas. And
Can I just say, Hyle?
Yeah.
This picture of DK eating the bananas might be my new favorite picture of Donkey Kong. He's having the time of his life. I didn't know DK could look so happy.
If you are watching this or listening to this on YouTube or SoundCloud, please, please, please look at the middle of the episode artwork. That's what we're talking about right now. He's got the flecks of banana cream just flying out of his mouth.
It's so good. I love it.
Yeah, that's the new Donkey Kong design, and it had been rolled out in September. But maybe they felt safe in rolling it out then because who could tell? Who could tell?
Right. This is a small picture. Who's going to notice?
Yeah. So some of this new merchandise, by the way, there's a new yellow t-shirt. It's got Donkey Kong's new design on the front, and on the back, it's his ass. It's the classic, 1-2 front shot, ass shot that they did back in 1994 with Donkey Kong Country and the most beloved Donkey Kong render of all time. But they did it on the Nintendo Power Player's Guide. They did it on a promotional t-shirt at the time that just said Donkey Kong's back, and they just had the ass on it. And here we've got, coming full circle, Donkey Kong's ass. Now, you can't see the crack in this artwork, sad to say. I'm hoping when we see his 3D render, his asshole will be on full display. Because what's a Donkey Kong game without the asshole, I ask you? It's not a Donkey Kong game at all.
Yeah, it's 2025.
But, yeah, Donkey Kong's ass is on the back of this shirt. I'm just like, they know what they're doing.
He's looking back. He's looking back at you.
Yeah. He's like, look at this. Look at my middle-age bare ass, everyone. I've lost some of the definition, but you still want a piece of this.
It's still there.
There's a lot of this merchandise has Donkey with Diddy. They're paired together. And Diddy looks the same, by the way. It doesn't look like they tweaked Diddy at all. But what clinched it for me was one of the images of Donkey and Diddy together. They were on these like notepads, many different images seen in very low res on these notepads. But I looked at one of these images and it's Diddy on Donkey's shoulders and they're high-fiving each other like in Donkey Kong Country, just the classic Kong high five tagging out. And I was like, I've seen this before. So I referenced it. There had been a piece of artwork that had been on various t-shirts and maybe some other things in the past year or two. It was this exact artwork. The difference here being that they reworked it to update Donkey Kong's brow to reflect the new design. They also added a line underneath his nose. There's the new like line going down the middle of like into his mouth that's on the movie design and all of this new artwork of Donkey Kong. And there's like I mean, that's pretty much it. Like the fur might be a little bit darker, but I think that's just a contrast issue. But yeah, like they updated this old image of Donkey and Diddy and they changed Donkey to reflect his new design. They tweaked it.
Oh, they tweaked it all right.
And I saw this and I'm just like, well, that settles it. Like that's what's happening here. So I was like, yeah, I did it. I solved it. I cracked the case, everyone.
Good for you, Hyle.
Very pleased with my Sherlocking of the situation. So yes, Donkey Kong's design in the video games and merchandise has been changed. And, you know, it might be the new Mario Kart that reflects it first. We'll see. But what does this mean? What does this really mean for the 30-year legacy of Donkey Kong Country and Rare's Donkey Kong? Does this mean it's the end of the road, be it Route 66 or Radiator Springs, for Rare's Donkey Kong, for the DKU Donkey Kong? Is this the end of the story? Does DK Vine just end our games page here? Do we become solely a nostalgic website remembering when Donkey Kong had hips? No, that's not what's happening here. Now, I understand the concerns felt in the fandom because they have been ingrained in this fandom for the past 22 years. Since the buyout was announced, there has been this fear of whether Nintendo would either reboot the Donkey Kong series or maybe more accurately deboot the Donkey Kong series back to what it was before Donkey Kong Country. You know, something to better match their sensibilities. And at the height of the buyout era, we all felt like they hate Rare. Everyone hates Rare now. Donkey Kong Country has been critically reevaluated to be utter trash. We were on the defensive. We were on like this wartime footing constantly as a fan base. And we were really worried about the accumulated lore, you know, Cranky being the original Donkey Kong, first and foremost. We were worried about the series' own autonomy away from Super Mario. We thought that would be discarded. And I completely get how those old feelings can resurface. Seeing that they have changed Donkey Kong's design definitively in the games to match what's seen in the movie, which does harken back to Miyamoto's own Donkey Kong 94 design just a bit. I get it.
Right.
I completely understand. But here is where I play Mr. Zen. Here is where I come in with a steady hand and I say, it's okay. It's okay.
It's all right, little guy.
You know what?
Come on out.
Take a lie down. Breathe deep.
Yeah, we're not going to hurt you.
I think this happening this year in 2025 compared to it happening in 2017 or 2010 or 2003 or any other time they could have pulled this ripcord. I think it feels far different now and a lot less heavy. And I'm going to explain why. For one, it's come when there's no question that Diddy is an integral part of the series. Diddy is included alongside this new Donkey Kong design in most of this merchandise.
Yeah.
Diddy is in all of the new merchandise imagery on the calendar. Like behind the new design of Donkey Kong, you've got all these silhouettes of Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong. Like Diddy has been everywhere in recent years. And this isn't like it was in 2005 when Jungle Beat came out and we were like, oh, Diddy. Oh, poor Diddy.
They took him out back.
So the calendar, in the description for the calendar that Harry N. Abrams put out, it talks up that you're going to see other Donkey Kong characters in the calendar, like Diddy, like Dixie Kong, and like Cranky Kong.
Cranky Kong? Oh, my goodness.
You know, and talking about Cranky Kong, oh, if I can recall back to 2023, I seem to recall that appearing prominently alongside this design of Donkey Kong in the Super Mario Bros. Movie was Cranky Kong. Oh, and Diddy was there, Dixie was there, Chunky Kong was there, Swanky Kong was there. Okay, I feel better.
Still crazy.
I feel better already. It's also being done right after Super Nintendo World opened in Japan. Super Nintendo World, the Donkey Kong Country section, prominently celebrates, go figure, Donkey Kong Country. I know it's the retro era of Donkey Kong Country, but it's still Donkey Kong Country.
Right.
You know, you've got all of this accumulated evidence that Nintendo is not discarding anything from the last 30 years. And in fact, if we're to look at Swanky and Chunky in a Super Mario Bros. Movie, they might even be using this stuff even more than the retro era used it.
That's for sure. I don't recall seeing Swanky or Chunky in the last 30 years or so.
Well, I mean, in the last 30 years, maybe not in the last 22 years, but yeah. Like, so the big question is, why are they doing this? And why are they doing this now? And this is where I admit to being wrong about something. Because when the design debuted for the Super Mario Bros. Movie, I said, look, they're not going to be updating his look. I really don't think they're going to be updating his look for the games with this new design, because I was looking at the theme park and I was saying they have way too much tied up in the old look for Donkey Kong. It doesn't make any sense for them to be like just going with this new design whole hog. And
right.
If I'm honest, that discrepancy still feels a little bit weird to me. Like, I know the theme park has been in development for the better part of the 2010s, like from like 2014 or so onward. So they had been working with like the old design of Donkey Kong, but you'd still think they would have a couple years to, like, I don't know, maybe reflect the new design with the costume Donkey Kong or whatever that you can do the meet and greet with. But I also think they were waiting for a new ground floor to really make this change. And I don't think there's ever really a good time to do that, because you're always going to have something going on with merchandise or, you know, outside promotions. And what we've actually been seeing over the past 2 years has been an incremental rollout of this new Donkey Kong design since the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And in retrospect, Dustin, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, or I think it's probably a misnomer to say that this is the movie design. I think this
I mean, it doesn't look just like it.
Well, no. What I'm saying, though, is this design probably wasn't created just for the movie. I think they used the movie as an excuse to debut this design. But I think this design, and this might be a chicken and egg situation where we never really know the full details. Because, Nintendo keeps things very close to the chest when it comes to how they come up with their ideas. But I don't know, I have a feeling, and maybe I am putting notions upon the man, as we used to do in a negative sense, and now I'm doing more positively. But I have a feeling that Miyamoto has maybe been itching to update the Donkey Kong design and bring it to some sort of happier middle ground from his perspective for years now. And I don't think he hated the Kev Bayless rare design, but I think what he wanted to do was bring it to a house style that was closer to his own artwork and something a little bit more in line with his Donkey Kong 94 style, DK Senior in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like every time we've seen Donkey Kong post buyout, post 2002, a lot of times they've been trying to force design elements into the character design that maybe wasn't built for them. And this is, again, where we talk about the toothy grin. Sticking that much despised, at least by the DK Vine staff, toothy grin into his face. That I don't think ever really worked with this design. Not really. And some people might argue me on that. If you grew up seeing that toothy grin, you're like, well, what's wrong with it? That's always been Donkey Kong. But I feel like they're always trying to get those arcade era chompers on a DK model that wasn't built to facilitate them.
Right, I get that. It was made without the teeth in mind, and then when you force them in, it looks weird.
It looks like somebody with giant false teeth.
Yeah, over time, it grew on me fine. I don't love when DK shows his teeth, but I'm fine with it at this point.
I can't say it grew on me.
Maybe it's just because they've done it so much.
Yeah, I can't say it grew on me. I just got used to it. And, it's the Regal theorem that we like to bring up, where so long as Donkey Kong was paired with Diddy Kong, Donkey Kong didn't seem like an asshole, even if he was doing the toothy grin. But a lot of times in isolation, he was doing the toothy grin, and he looked like a maniacal jackass or just a stark raving lunatic.
Yeah, especially in the Jungle Beat ones. I just can't stand it. I know we've all made our peace with Jungle Beat, but I'm still not a huge fan of those renders.
For me, the most dastardly ugly model of Donkey Kong in the past 22 years has been Mario Kart DS. If you look at the Mario Kart DS in-game model, it is because they were just we got to get the toothy grin in there, but that's all he did. That's all he could do. And so it was just Donkey Kong driving around with this rictus grin. He looked like he had been Jokerized. It's awful. And it's just why? He looks so much better without the teeth. Why are you forcing this design element onto this style of Donkey Kong that can't contain this? But Mario Kart 8, as you already said, that was also a kind of a poor design. And
yeah.
So I think Miyamoto has always, or has for the last several years in the back of his mind saying, God, it would be nice to kind of rethink and retool Donkey Kong so he can have some of the expressions we want him to have. And whether or not I think Donkey Kong needs to have those expressions, that's another story. The fact is, his creator wants him to be able to do some of this stuff. So my theory now is that the Super Mario Brothers movie represented a golden opportunity because it would then expose this tweaked design to the most amount of people possible. And especially like younger fans who would be coming in to the fandom with this movie. They would see this model of Donkey Kong, and for them, that would be Donkey Kong. And then
a pretty good launching off spot for it.
And then for everyone else, for the old time Donkey Kong fans, for the Donkey Kong Country fans who might be hesitant to this change, it would at the very least get us used to it without like fully forcing it on us right away. And we would still have plenty of time to get used to this while we're also seeing the old Donkey Kong with the theme park, with Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. And then when they finally unveil the new console, that is when they go for it. That's when they make their move and say, this is the way Donkey Kong looks in game now. How do you feel about that? Once upon a time, this would have been devastating for me. Back when I was more immature, back when I didn't have the perspective and the honest benefit of years of fandom and seeing the ebbs and flow, and also worrying about other more important things in the world other than the way a cartoon gorilla looks in a racing game. But I look at this design and I think, from certain angles, from certain expressions, it does look very, very different than what we're used to. But then you look at it from other perspectives, from other expressions, and you say, there's still plenty of the rare design in there. It's really not that different. And I think we've seen a lot of hyperbole. It is the most different he's looked since 1994. I will grant you that. But I think the hyperbole comes in when people say it is a complete reversion to the arcade style Donkey Kong.
Yeah. It definitely not.
It's not even a reversion to Donkey Kong 94. And I'm glad Donkey Kong 94 was just added to Nintendo Switch Online. So maybe it refreshes people how he actually looked, how Donkey Kong Sr. actually looked in that game. Because
he looks very different.
The general structure of the brow and the eyes and the cowlick are still the rare design. Like, I think that you look at the Donkey Kong 94 design, they've added the ridge going down to the mouth in the middle of his upper lip. That has been added to it. Maybe the ears are more of a hybrid between the rare design and the DK94 design.
One other small thing is he has the little eyebrow fuzz in the corners that, when I first saw this new artwork, I thought was a little much. I was like, oh, why does he have that? But then looking back at the original Donkey Kong illustrations, he has that eyebrow fuzz on the corners, like right above his muzzle.
It's always
just bringing that element back in.
It's always been an element of Miyamoto's Donkey Kong sketches. And you look at the famous three-way dance, the N64 butt plug, if you will, of Miyamoto's proposed sketch for Donkey Kong Country, Kev Bayless's Battletoads 90s Extreme fugly ass monster sketch, and at the time, the happy compromise between the two, which was Rare's final rendered image of the modern Donkey Kong. And just two extremes, right? You get Miyamoto's very cutesy cartoon gorilla, like almost a Hanna-Barbera character. You get Kev Bayless's 90s mutant from the sewer. And then you get the laid-back Gen Xer that is the modern Donkey Kong. It just cracks me up, the disparity between the three, really. But you look at the new Donkey Kong design, and it really does retain a lot of essential elements of the rare design still. It's just maybe more of a happier compromise. Like, let's ignore Kev Bayless's early monstrosity. And, like, no offense to Kev Bayless or his art, but, like, come on. That might have looked cool in 94, but that would not have aged well at all. I think this is a happy middle ground between the Donkey Kong 94, Donkey Kong Sr., and the rare Donkey Kong. I think this takes a little bit of both. There's something recognizable in it for fans of both, but it still feels very much like our Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I would say it's like, and you know, this is just me pulling numbers out of my ass, but it feels like 85% rare DK with an additional 15% arcade DK. Just little elements here and there brought back in.
And look, they have been kind of slow walking this for a bit because they already changed Donkey Kong's nose a few years back to get rid of the rare, like, flat nostrils. And initially
nostrils
they like
painted on.
Yeah, initially they just slightly raised them. Like they made like a little bit of a bevel around the edge of them. But then they just moved it up to look like it used to on the Miyamoto sketches, on the DK94 design. And then I was just like, that's Donkey Kong's nose. Just deal with it.
And I like it myself. I think it was a good change.
I've gotten used to it. Like, it's really like what feels warm and familiar and fuzzy to you. And of course, for me, somebody who became a fan of Donkey Kong Country in 1994, my sweet spot is always going to be my childhood. Right. And what Donkey Kong looked like in my childhood. But I also am self-aware enough to realize that my childhood is long in the rearview mirror and things never stay stagnant. And so,
nor should they.
Like, looking at Donkey Kong's new design, I see enough in there that I can grow to like it. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. Let's just say that. It's going to take a lot of getting used to, but I see a lot of this artwork, this 2D artwork, and I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. Like, the jury's still out on how it'll look in rendered form. Super Mario Brothers movie, I got used to it. And, like, by the end of the movie, it wasn't that jarring for me anymore. But there's certain expressions he pulls where I'm like, Donkey Kong doesn't do that.
What are you, you weird monster? Get out of here.
I'm going to have to get over it, Dustin. And I think that is kind of what the last 2 years have been about. It's been a slow, like, acclimatization of, like, getting us used to this DK design. So I'm kind of thankful for it, honestly, because if we just saw this in the Mario Kart trailer and this was our first sighting of it,
it'd be very drastic.
It would be very drastic. I think the reaction, like, across the board would be far more, not only negative, it would be almost apocalyptically negative. Like, I'm only privy to, by Josh Wallen's hearsay, like, what goes on in the Sonic fandom concerning the various Sonic designs.
Right.
I don't want that for our fandom, Dustin.
Yeah, they can get a little passionate about changes.
Yeah.
I mean, for the longest time, it was Sonic has green eyes now. No, thank you. Get that out of here.
I mean, look, Diddy's eyes have been 3 or 4 different colors at this point.
Get on our level.
Prosthetic golfing fingers, anyone? Come on. I know I'm just one voice in a very large international fandom, and DK, like, even taking DK Vine into account, we're just a few little drops in a big ocean. But I do hope we can help, like, calm people down about this, because I don't think this means anything bad. In fact, I think this only means good things for the future of Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I don't think they would redesign Donkey Kong or touch up his design and not use him, like just do it for no reason.
Which is what I want to start breaking down now. Because the other big question is, will the other Kongs be given redesigns? Was the Super Mario Brothers movie a big old preview, a big buffet of what to expect from the rest of the Donkey Kong cast going forward? As far as Diddy goes, I'm leaning towards no, because nothing in the new merchandise reflects any overhaul of his general appearance.
Yeah, if they were going to redesign Diddy Kong as well, they would have, along with DK. We would be seeing it with this new merchandise. And
I think the thinking behind that, and they changed his appearance a little bit for the movie. They probably, like, the Nintendo logo on his hat is probably the biggest problem, right? Because that it looks dumb outside of any other context other than Diddy video game star. I think the thinking behind Diddy Kong is that's not Miyamoto's baby. I think Miyamoto likes Diddy. Diddy probably likes Miyamoto too. They're probably chums.
They probably hang out.
I think Miyamoto's like, I'm fine with Diddy's design. I didn't come up with Diddy, but, you know.
Yeah, it's not like you had your Donkey Kong design and then he got changed over the years, so you kind of want to rein him back in a little bit. Diddy would just be, oh, someone else made that design and I like what they did.
Yeah, I think Miyamoto's been on record as saying Donkey Kong's his baby. Like, even more so than Mario, Donkey Kong is, like, the character he is most passionate about. So that makes sense to me why they would tweak Donkey Kong's design. Diddy, I think, is fine as is. And I think any tweaks in the movie aren't necessarily representative of the games going forward. It's probably the same with Dixie, honestly. Like, I do wish they would give Dixie her knee pads back. I wish they would give Dixie something on her beret. I don't think DX pin is the way to go, but you know.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Wouldn't it be funny? It be funny, Hyle, if it turned out Diddy Kong was Miyamoto's favorite character ever, like in anything?
I mean, relatable.
Yeah, exactly. It would just be unexpected. I would be like, oh, I didn't expect that, but very cool choice.
I mean, honestly, I would question anyone who says Diddy isn't their favorite character. I would be like, that's pretty shady shit you're saying right there.
Yeah, maybe you should think that one through a little harder.
Here's where I think we might see some tweaks. Maybe not much. Maybe not as dramatic, but I think the other Gorilla Kongs in the mold of Donkey Kong might have their designs tweaked to better reflect the brow situation. And I'm looking at stills from the movie and how Cranky looked and how Swanky looked and how other gorillas in the Kong army looked, and like that big bouncer gorilla who met them at the gates of the Jungle Kingdom. And they did make their brows look like Donkey Kong's brows. Like, there's subtle variations, like Swanky's brow isn't as dark in the, like, around the eye region as Donkey and Cranky look, but they're basically like the new, or at least for the movie, they are the in-house Gorilla Kong style. I think Chunky was reimagined with this style in the movie, where in DK64 he had the appearance of the Monkey Kongs, which was always kind of this incongruous part of Chunky's character, where he was designed to look like one of the rare monkeys, but he like read in every other way as a gorilla.
Yeah, he didn't have the brow. He's missing that brow.
He had 4 fingers, too, in the game. And I know the finger game isn't something Nintendo plays, but that used to be the biggest indicator. Are you a gorilla or are you a Monkey Kong? Well, Chunky had 4 fingers, so he seemed to read as a monkey to me.
I don't know what to tell you.
So yeah, I could see Cranky's design being tweaked to reflect the new Donkey Kong design. I could see Swanky being tweaked. I could see Funky being tweaked, but I don't know. Because again, those aren't really Miyamoto's babies. I mean, from a certain point of view, Cranky, sure, but I think that's up in the air right now, and I can't say for sure.
Right. Time will tell. I'm very interested in seeing what they're going to do with them, if anything.
So what does this mean precisely for Donkey Kong's future? What can we glean from this? Well, we can't say for sure again. We don't have any evidence of this other than logic, maybe. But
yeah.
Could this actually be the first evidence we've had in quite some time that the rumors that we've reported, that we've followed, that Donkey Kong was taken in internally, Nintendo EPD, and they have been working on his new game? Could this be the first evidence that that is in fact true? Quick recap on the rumors, and then we'll get into it. Because
okay, good.
When I first learned about the Vicarious Visions 3D Donkey Kong project several years back when I learned about it, it was already long dead when I learned about it. But I learned about it, and I was chasing some of this stuff, like Donkey Kong's merchandising being given its own separate branding from Super Mario. I was like, that seems significant. What's the deal with that? So I started greasing some wheels. I started, elbowing some sources. And it's like, what can you tell me here?
You did your little Hyle sweet talk.
My little Donkey Kong journalism. What can I say? And I learned about the Vicarious Visions project, and I heard that at the time when it fell through, when Activision was like, stop that. Word was that Nintendo was then, they were like, all right, fine, we'll do it. We've got to get Donkey Kong off the ground again. Miyamoto loves him some Donkey Kong games on store shelves, and this is getting ridiculous at this point. We are just going to take Donkey Kong back home. We're going to be developing Donkey Kong internally via Nintendo EPD. And that's the last I heard of that story. The trail went cold on the eastern shores of the Pacific, where I could not follow. So right. It's been so many years now, Dustin. And, doubt sets in. It creeps in after a bit. And you're like, well, that's where we last left it. But who knows what's been happening since then? Because in that time, there was a massive worldwide pandemic that kind of ground everything to a halt for a bit. And we just didn't know. Could circumstances have changed? For all we knew, Nintendo EPD made me realize they just wouldn't have the space to fully support Donkey Kong amongst their various teams. Like all the projects and franchises they're already juggling, and then to take on Donkey Kong, which has been since 1993 developed externally by other studios, except for that brief time Nintendo EAD did Jungle Beat. And maybe they're like, somebody else is going to have to do it. We are going to have to find another studio. And I doubted that. I mean, I still doubt that, but I can't say it's not possible because I just don't know. I can't get anybody to tell me otherwise.
There's no way to know.
I've tried to find out stuff, but Nintendo is basically like a bank vault. You have to be like the leaks we get from Nintendo. There's people leaking Nintendo Directs. They're coming from like close to the end of the chain, right? These aren't leaks coming from inside Nintendo, generally speaking. And when they do, those people are executed very quickly out back. I've also heard people speculate, people who maybe don't keep up on the latest Donkey Kong rumors and hearsay. I've heard a lot of people say, well, Nintendo is obviously waiting on Retro to finish Metroid Prime 4, and then Retro will get to work on the next Donkey Kong game.
I think so.
I very much doubt that. I think Retro is done with Donkey Kong. I do. I think the glacial pace Retro has been moving with Metroid Prime 4. And it looks like they're making great progress finally. It looks like the end is in sight for Metroid Prime 4. But
right, it's actually scheduled to exist and come out.
I think Miyamoto wants Donkey Kong in more reliable hands. And I'm not saying Retro didn't do a good job during their tenure, but he
wants him in hands that can be... like, you can... I don't even know what words I'm trying to put it into without sounding like I'm being mean to Retro. He wants him in hands that can just regularly hold on to him.
Yeah. Maybe he wants a Donkey Kong game more than every 15 years.
Yeah.
Because you gotta think.
You know what? I relate to that.
You gotta think, when Retro is finally done with the Metroid Prime 4, you're saying then they would just be starting a Donkey Kong game from scratch. So
just
it would then,
yeah,
it would then be another half decade before we even see it. No, thank you. I don't want that. I want Donkey Kong games to happen in my lifetime, Dustin.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing at least one more Donkey Kong game before I die.
Yeah, before I know I always
more.
I know I always say I'm going to come back as a ghost and what have you and haunt everyone, but I can't guarantee I can make that work. That's a tall order.
Right. That takes you got to ask for a lot of favors.
Here we have Miyamoto directly influencing the artistic direction of Donkey Kong in a way he really hasn't since that last sketch he sent Rare in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Like Donkey Kong 94 was kind of the end of the road for that. This is the bold editorial, taking the bull by the horns method, and Nintendo typically doesn't do. And when I say Nintendo, I mean internal Nintendo EPD, Nintendo who makes Nintendo games. They typically don't do this unless they themselves are in charge of a particular series. So we've known that Nintendo has big plans for Donkey Kong. And I mean, we're living it right now. We're in just knee deep with big plans for Donkey Kong. It's almost over our mouths. We're drowning in big plans for Donkey Kong. Dustin.
Right. You can't take 2 steps without stepping in Donkey Kong.
So you start connecting the dots. You start thinking about all the stories we've been chasing since 2017, 2018. And I think it leads to this big flashing signal that, yes, Miyamoto is probably overseeing a new Donkey Kong game. This is the way Donkey Kong looks in the new Donkey Kong game. And what's even more tantalizing of a possibility, connecting all of these dots, all these various errant Kong things that we've been talking about, but especially from the last 2 years or so. We think back to the movie and, a lot of the things we chalked up in the movie, the fan service, the very surprising fan service in the movie that we just wrote off at the time as being Illumination's creative decisions. It was Illumination who thought it might be fun to have Chunky Kong or Swanky Kong in the movie. I'm now wondering, very openly, very boldly, could that have been Nintendo's call, Nintendo's mandate even?
It's interesting because that feels like such an un-Nintendo move that you just kind of jump to the conclusion, oh, well, obviously someone at Illumination made that call, but maybe it wasn't.
Well, to that, I say this, Dustin. Nintendo EPD was also responsible for a game called Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario
I think
Odyssey.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was kind of under the radar. It underperformed. I think 6 people might have played it.
Not really a well-known IP.
Yeah. It was before the movie came out and really exposed the brand to more people. But Super Mario Odyssey had a world called the Metro Kingdom with a in-universe location called New Donk City. And New Donk City was just resplendently stuffed with references to the Donkey Kong series. And you got your usual standard fare that you might expect, the stuff that retro studios themselves felt safe to reference, your girders, your arcade Donkey Kong. But then it went deeper than even any Donkey Kong game has gone since Payon was making their 3 games. You got references to K. Rool. You got references to Radley the Rattlesnake. You got references to Tiny Kong.
It gets into the weeds.
From what I heard when this rumor was relayed to me, and I say rumor only to keep people's expectations in check, it was relayed to me as, this is what's happening. Can you dig it? No shade towards retro intended. But what was relayed to me from a source I very much trust was that there are diehard Donkey Kong Country fans working for Nintendo EPD, and Odyssey was kind of reflective of how giddy they are for Diddy. And those references were just them showing, like, we love Donkey Kong and we can't wait to work on Donkey Kong. And then I see Swanky and I see Chunky in the movie, and I'm just like, how deep is this fan service going to go if this game does exist, if this game still exists, and this is indeed what is happening? Well, I'm not going to sit here and say that, yeah, Swanky and Chunky are confirmed to be in the next Donkey Kong game, because I think that's
exactly.
silly.
I don't want to get my hopes up.
I think that, yeah, like, let's not put the I was going to say cart before the horse, but let's not put the cart before the Donkey Kong in this case.
Right. I don't want to, like, expect to see literally every single Donkey Kong character. I don't want to say, like, oh, they promised that Troff and Scoff would be in there.
Troff and Scoff's nipple-piercing pagoda will be in the next Donkey Kong game. I got it from my source, Dustin.
My source being my ass.
My very well-toned ass, now more well-toned than Donkey Kong.
Good for you, Hyle.
You know, I keep it tight. What can I say?
I know. I can see it from here.
Dustin, we were just complimenting your ergonomic ass during the entirety of the last episode of the Kongversation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's not on a t-shirt, though, yet.
Well, just you wait till the Kongversation season 14.
Yeah, look forward to that album artwork.
So, yeah, like, I'm thinking that all of a sudden, it seems more plausible and likely than it did back in 2023, but I think the movie might have been our first true glimpse of what Donkey Kong's future could look like if Nintendo EPD is indeed in charge. And I think Donkey Kong's redesign is a big clue that actually might be the case.
Yeah. I think all signs point to yes. You know, again, we can't promise that's what's going on. Who knows? Maybe even though Miyamoto redesigned him, it's totally possible they said, okay, we're handing this game off to someone else, but you're going to use this Donkey Kong design. This is how he looks now. But I do agree that it feels like all signs point to it being developed internally.
The irony of ironies would be if the studio they went to make the new Donkey Kong game was Rare. And they said, you know, that Everwild game you've got in development, it would be a lot better if you turned it into Donkey Kong Adventures Everwild.
So that's why we haven't heard anything about it in a while.
They just retooled it to incorporate.
Of course.
And then, of course, you know, at the very end, K. Rool turns out to be behind it all. And, you know, he like jumps out of the bloom deer mouth.
He's the one who made that big salamander throw up all the fish.
He did it. I mean, I think that would both be the best thing ever and would disappoint so many people. If that was what Donkey Kong's new game was. The last thing I'll say before we take the calls is I'm wondering, just based off the movie, and like they made design tweaks for Donkey Kong, but they also tweaked something else.
What are you saying, Hyle?
They went with the notion, which was the notion under Rare for a few years, that Cranky Kong is Donkey Kong's father. And I'm wondering if that is also another Miyamoto-introduced simplification.
I think it would be for the best, personally. I feel like there's just too many things up in the air, too many implications if certain things are the way they are. I do think it would be best to kind of reel it in and say, like, okay, we got to set the record straight on some of this stuff. What's the simplest, easiest way we can do this?
Yeah, like, I could even see if Miyamoto is back in charge, or at least under, like, he's, like, making all these, like, producer decisions, but he's not, like, directly hands-on with the game. I could even see him going with the current DK actually being an adult DK Jr., just doing it, just finally saying, yeah, that's what's going on. Like, I'm convinced one way or another, they're never going to reference the notion of Junior again outside of historical throwbacks, like the sprite in Mario Kart Tour that you can play as. But I really am wondering if part of this new era of Donkey Kong is taking all of the things that have been up in the air since the Rare era and just saying, yeah, like, let's close this book. This is silly that this is still a thing. And Miyamoto has the authority to do that. I mean, Donkey Kong is his baby. So he would be like, yeah, this is the way it is. I'm in charge again. I'm in charge. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, like, I do feel like that is just the quickest, cleanest cut way to do it. But I could also see a world where he decides that, like, I don't necessarily think this is what he would do, but I don't think it's out of possibility that he could say, no, our modern DK is the same DK that fought Mario back in the day. Cranky is just his grandma. He's just an old man gorilla. I don't think he would do that, but I don't want to say, like, that's an impossible thing that could happen either. And honestly, I would hate to lose Cranky as the original DK. And he's gone on record saying he loves Cranky Kong. So I don't think he would necessarily do that either. But if that were the route they would go down, I would just be like, okay, fine, whatever. The record is set. That's just how it's going to be going forward. I might not like it and agree with it, but I'm just going to accept it.
I don't think that they would do that because it would directly contradict so much from the original Donkey Kong Country games and Donkey Kong 64. Like, I think they might not bring it up. And like, in the last 22 years, they have brought it up from time to time when it's convenient to bring it up. When it's not convenient to bring it up, when they just want to promote Donkey Kong, like Mario versus Donkey Kong, they don't bring it up. But it never contradicts anything either, because, it's just like father like son or like father like grandson. So it doesn't matter. And I think it's going to be kind of like Schrodinger's cat, Schrodinger's Kong. It's like whatever you choose to believe will apply to this. And I think that's going to be mostly the ethos going forward. But I do think there might be some clarification, like finally settling the father/grandfather debate, and just simplifying it. And, so
I think it's for the best.
I agree. But Dustin, I had to be a bit of a hard ass with this episode. I hate to say, I like to make people happy. I like to bring smiles to faces. I like to do that.
Yeah, of course. You do it every day.
So, we let people call into the hotline, the DK Vine hotline, 1-202-630-VINE, or 8463. People call in, and we play their calls towards the end of every episode.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard that before.
It's something we do. It's a neat little feature of the show that has been a part of the show since its beginning, but
it's just this cute little thing we do.
Dustin, we had 16 calls on this episode.
That's a lot. That's not a small number of calls.
That's a lot, especially for an episode that's not centered on calls. And I was just like, I can't take all these calls. I'm going to have to cut this down by half. So apologies to the 8 or so of you. I don't know. There might have been more calls coming in even as we started the episode, but I had to draw the line at 8 calls. So
Headmaster Hyle had to smack his ruler down on the desk.
I'm so sorry. Some of these calls date back to January 16th. People were calling in to the DK Vine hotline right after they saw the Switch 2 trailer.
Day of. Wow.
Day of. They're just like, I know what I need to do. 1-202-630-VINE. So we're going to play some of those. We're going to play some of them that came in this week. Again, sorry if we don't play your call. It is nothing personal. There's no vendetta against you. Sometimes I can't play every single call. So, Dustin.
We'll try not to hold it against you.
Dustin has that art commission money in his pocket. Dustin's got to eat dinner tonight.
That's true. I need to afford my Hot Pockets.
So we are going to play the calls, and then Dustin's gonna just go to town on some hot pee, which is what I call Hot Pockets.
Yeah, you know that picture of Donkey Kong scarfing down all those bananas, and he's having the time of his life? That's gonna be me and my big pile of Hot Pockets.
The season 14 Kongversation artwork with your ass on the back of it.
I love it.
Let's play the first call.
Hi, this is Falnax, calling in to talk about what else the Switch 2 and the Donkey Kong redesign that we got as a consequence. I'm sure a lot of people have called, so I'm going to keep it brief. I think one of the main things to note here is, like, obviously this does probably mean different things for, like, how Yuki is going to look in future games, but Mario Kart 9 or whatever this is appears to be a lot more stylized in general. Like, you look at some of the other characters, like Luigi especially looks a lot like his Nintendo 64 renders. And we've seen, like, in Super Mario Bros. Wonder, you have, like, the old Yoshi design back, so it's clear that they're trying to harken back to their older games in a lot of different ways, and Donkey Kong could be, like, could definitely be part of that, well, more of the classic DK elements. In terms of the design itself, I think that I'm not necessarily as much of a fan of it as I am with the Bear design. I think the strongest argument before for the redesign is that we've had people say before that, like, the rare DK is a little bit, like, limited in expressions because, like, the eyebrows are fixed in one place. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, especially when you allow him to be more cartoony. You can do a lot more with the eyes and the mouth, and I think he can definitely be very expressive. So I don't quite agree, but it's not the end of the world either, and it probably does bode well for future DK games. Like, they probably wouldn't spend this much time sort of laying the groundwork for some redesigns if they weren't going to do something with it, and it makes me more confident that's not just, like, stuff relating to the movie, although DK is probably going to be in future Mario movies, so it's probably part of it. But I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to go buy Donkey Kong Country Returns HD and probably have a good time with it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the call. You said we were going to get a lot of calls. You were right, but you were also our first call. So you got in. You got in just based on being the earliest of early birds. You got the worm, my friend.
Good for you. You win the Worm Award.
Oh, it's Worm Week.
Woo!
No, they brought up that some people have said these character models. We said I've seen Super Mario Kart. Okay, the artwork from Super Mario Kart, but others have said they look like the renders from Mario Kart 64. I think maybe it's a mix or match kind of thing. But I think maybe people are just seeing what it's like a Rorschach test. It's like an ink blot.
They see what they want to see.
Yeah. I like, why am I seeing my mom's vagina in Waluigi? That's gross.
That's a good question.
They need to put Sigmund Freud in a Mario Kart game. Thank you for the call. Let's play our second call. Oh, this is our longest call. I wonder who this could be.
Hey, DK Vine, this is Traveler of the Stars, calling in about the Donkey Kong design stuff. I don't know the context of when this call is going to be played. I actually called previously, but I wanted to revise those calls to give a little different opinion here, or really just kind of a cooler head. excited for the Switch 2. I'm happy that it's going to be an iterative console. Excited for new Mario Kart. I love Mario Kart. But talking about the DK design, I just want to jump right into it. You do not have to like it, okay? But I think the people who are like, Nintendo is defiling Rare's legacy. Miyamoto hates Donkey Kong Country. It's like, do you hear yourself? I don't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. But I just think it's melodramatic and it's kind of ridiculous. Kev Bayless, who I want to remind people is the person who designed the Rare Donkey Kong design, he today said, and I quote, "Unfortunately, when I designed him, because he basically had Battletoad eyes, it is hard to give Donkey Kong any expression other than annoyed. This is something I take a little more into consideration when creating characters today." The reason why this design was included is revised, which, by the way, we don't even know if it'll be like a long-term thing. It may be, but if you take a look at like a side-by-side of like DK and Diddy like 5-5ing each other, like it's a knockaway design, the side-by-side, they literally look the exact same, aside from the fur being a little darker, DK's muscles, I think, being a tad bigger, and the brow not being the scowl. I think they're just doing this to make him more expressive. I understand that, like, oh, you didn't have more rare characters in Return to Tropical Freeze. You know, it was in Return to Tropical Freeze. Eventually, there was Funky and Dixie and Randy and DK and Diddy. You know, if they didn't want rare stuff, they wouldn't make a whole theme park about Donkey Kong Country. Do you realize that, people? Again, you don't have to like it. And yeah, they should have had King K. Rool on guard in some recent games, and I get that, I agree. But like, just coming as a new fan who grew up with Returns, but also grew up with Jungle Climber and Slugger and Super Slugger, so I have an appreciation for old and new stuff. It just gets tiring. Just Nintendo just hates rare stuff. It's like, no, if they did, do you think Nintendo would have any issue just doing a Jungle Beat style thing where it's just that? No. They'll just do it. You know what I'm saying? So that's my ranty thoughts. I'll call back really quickly to just say one more thing. So yeah, I am legitimately not trying to upset anyone. You don't have to like it. Again, just because Kev Bayless is in support of it, just because, in my opinion, it's just not, people are acting like it's a major change. It's just it's the brow, really, is the major thing. And again, you don't have to like it, but can we please just stop being like, oh, it's okay. Not every new thing is bad. I'm sorry, but like, Rare is gone. It's not going to be exactly like the Rare days anymore. And guess what? I love Retro Studios. And the chances are, Retro Studios aren't going to be making the next Donkey Kong game. It's not going to be exactly like them anymore. But it's okay, because they're new things. You know, it's just an evolution, and characters undergo designs changes. And, you know, again, I will say that people on DK Vine, you know, who maybe aren't as like big fans of Nintendo, they'll be like, man, it's so sterile nowadays with like Mario designs and, you know, standardization and all this stuff. And then Nintendo does a change, embracing more Mario wonder and expressiveness due to the movie. And people are like, whoa, what are they doing? It's just like, all in all, one more time, you don't have to like it. You don't have to consume all the new stuff and like it. I understand. But to act like this is some sort of like personal attack or just like defilement of Rare's legacy, come on. Can you stop? Because like this sort of behavior, it's like, I don't know, when there's a new game, it's like, oh, like, if not everything's exactly how it is it just bad? Is it just that? Like, I don't know. It's just frustrating. I'm excited for DK's future. I don't mean to be negative. Hyle, you're great. You're beautiful. Everyone listening, it's called Beautiful. Yeah, that's really it. Let's be excited for DK's future instead of fighting. Okay, goodbye.
Well, thank you for the calls, Traveler of the Stars.
Thank you.
You know, Dustin, I said this earlier in the episode, and I'll say it again. It's really something that I think people struggle with when you become a fan of something as a kid, but it's not something that's finite within the confines of your childhood. It's a long running, maybe it will even outlive you as a series, as a cultural institution. And along the way, you are going to see highs, you're going to see lows, but the thing that will be consistent is you are going to see change. Right. And this could apply to cartoons, this could apply to comic book characters, superheroes, anything that, I mean, it could apply to like big sci-fi franchises like Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, things that will always be able to stick around in part because they can reinvent themselves for new eras and new generations. And then it inevitably like brushes up against the older fans who were introduced at an earlier jumping on point, or maybe the very beginning even. And you're just like, I miss the way things were back then. And I miss my childhood. I miss when I didn't have to think about taxes and I didn't know. I
don't like change.
Politics, and I didn't know what inequality was. I miss when the world was all sunshine and rainbows. And you marry those happy feelings of childhood with your favorite thing from childhood, and the current modern day iteration of something represents all of the ills and coldness and bleakness of adulthood. With Donkey Kong, it's even more pronounced at times, I feel, because we have had these clear breaking points and these clear divvying up moments for the fandom where Rare is purchased by Microsoft. And then all of a sudden, the fandom is split in two. Are you on the Nintendo side? Are you on the Rare side? Do you like what Nintendo's doing with Donkey Kong? We take a side, take a stand.
Right.
Where are you in this battle? And
this battle.
That was the buyout era. And I feel like for as much as DK Vine as an institution, as far as our editorial voice, as much as we've matured past all of that strife, as much as we have put all of that in the past, Returns really helped with that, but also the clarifying moments from the last decade where it turned out that Jungle Beat wasn't made with any malice towards Rare. But
who could have guessed?
Unfortunately, that idea is still out there, that somebody at Nintendo, or a lot of people at Nintendo, have it out for the Rare characters, the Rare ideas.
They got a bone to pick with Rare.
This was really spread by a lot of the big time video game sites of the 2000s, and a lot of it was just complete falsehoods. The famous quote from Miyamoto that seems to be apocryphal about Donkey Kong Country. Miyamoto's been on record as saying he doesn't remember ever saying that, and if he did, he was wrong. And how much he loved Donkey Kong Country. So, I don't know Miyamoto. I've never met the man. I might have urinated in the same bathroom as him in my life, which was a privilege for sure. But
you know what? I might have too. I don't know.
As part of my duties as a Donkey Kong journalist, I figured out where Miyamoto peed at E3. Okay? Okay? And
is that cool with everybody?
And I would just lurk in the bathroom, waiting for a not at all creepy encounter, which never came. I get that this mentality is kind of baked into the DNA of online fan discourse when it comes to Donkey Kong, because it was just common wisdom. However wrong it was common wisdom for many, many years. But I think, to Traveler's point, but I'll also just more broadly speaking from my own perspective, I think the last few years, I would hope, would have dispelled a lot of these notions. And right. I know a lot of the lingering, I don't want to say trauma because that's a loaded word, but a lot of the lingering ill will that some of the fandom might feel right now is just purely down on there not being a new Donkey Kong game, a new standalone Donkey Kong game for 11 years.
Yeah, no new Donkey Kong game for 11 years, and then this is the new DK. This is too much change. I want the old Donkey Kong.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's kind of a snowball effect with a lot of people. I just want you to know, like, my own personal preferences aside, I am going to be supportive of whatever direction Donkey Kong goes in, unless it's like just complete ass. But I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I see no reason not to be optimistic about Donkey Kong's future. So, you're not going to get any back talk from me unless it's warranted.
You know what, Hyle? That's all we can ask of you, and you're doing a great job of it right now.
Oh, thank you. I'm not positive about a lot these days, but about this fictional cartoon gorilla, 70-30 maybe.
That's better than some people.
Yeah, it's better than the people apparently Traveler has been hanging out with.
I have seen a few doom and gloom people online, but luckily not too many.
Yeah, but you're going to get that with every fandom everywhere online.
Some people feel stronger about it than others.
Yeah, it's all really about your own perspective, what you're getting out of it. And, don't let other people's opinions sway you and ruin something for you.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do when you're really feeling put off by that is just unplug, disengage for a bit. And, I know from experience, sometimes I just stay in my own bubble, my own little DK Vine cocoon, when I don't want to have to deal with it. So, anyway, thank you for the calls. Let's take our third caller.
Hi, DK Vine. This is Joey. So that new Donkey Kong, he looks different. He has eyes I would describe as brighter and rounder. His old eyes were more like egg-shaped, but these new eyes, I would say, are more plate-shaped. The new brow ridge, I think, is good. I wish it was a bit thicker on the top, if I had to make any kind of critique. My biggest question is, what is Cranky Kong gonna look like? Because Cranky conventionally just shares a model, at least a facial model, facial mask with Donkey Kong. And he's been tweaked since the buyout to be more of his own shape, of his own thing. And even before that, I think he was already diverging. It might have been just Donkey Kong Country 1, where he was the exact same. But it looked strange for Cranky to be next to DK. But it would also, for him to be next to DK and them having two different diverging designs, definitely doable, but strange to imagine. Cranky Kong, he's also angry. What are they going to do with his eyebrows when it's so bright and plate shaped and happy and cheerful? His eyebrows, he has to be angry. He has to be cranky. Well, that's kind of just my message. Is what do you think they're going to do with Cranky Kong? And I guess the rest of them, but mostly him, because he has that cranky aspect. Like, Funky Kong with this new DK model is so easy to imagine, because the glasses cover it. And, we basically got Chunky Kong in the movie, and no one else and Swanky Kong. Yeah, it's like everyone but Cranky. And Cranky in the movie, I guess the answer is they'll just use the movie design. I didn't really...
Oh, well, Joey cut off at the 3-minute mark. Remember, there's a time limit on the calls, people. But thank you for the call. You know, I think the movie is probably the answer. Now, I don't think Cranky will be in the full-on king regalia. I don't think that will become an aspect of his character. I mean, it might, who's to say, but...
I wouldn't necessarily hate it if they did. I thought it looked okay, but I don't think they're going to do such a drastic change for the games.
Yeah, I think that with Cranky, I think, for all the Gorilla Kongs, you've already started to see variations in their size and shape, you know, as you mentioned with Funky, Cranky, but I think you're going to see a lot more nuance. And I think we saw that in the movie, honestly, like where they're all the same recognizable type of ape, but you did get differing amounts of what they could do with their faces. With Cranky in the movie, I seem to recall he had a lot of very exaggerated expressions, but he could very quickly shift from bemused or surprised to angry or cynical or distrusting. And the one thing that always brings to mind Cranky in the movie is how he would use his feet, how he was like using his feet as hands almost. And I think, I don't know, you might see a lot more movie designs in the games for the Kongs who are all just based on the Donkey Kong model in the Rare era. But again, I don't know. Right. I don't think it's necessarily accurate to say they are the movie designs. I think these could be designs that Nintendo already had cooking up.
That ended up being used in the movie.
Maybe they worked with Illumination a bit to like get the movie designs, you know, in working order. But I think the ideas definitely came from Nintendo. So yeah. I think you answered your own question there. I think Cranky would resemble more the Cranky from the movie, which, you know, I wasn't wild about Cranky's voice, Fred Armisen. Like, it was fine for the movie, but Donkey Kong's not going to sound like Seth Rogen in the games either. Right. I think that's also something people need to recognize. He's going to have his typical voice. I know we made jokes about it. Ew, don't pass me. Ew. But he's going to sound like Donkey Kong as we know him, which is going to go a long way towards communicating that, hey, this is the same guy.
Right. Cranky's movie voice, I didn't like it at first, but I think over time it kind of grew on me. Like, not that I want Cranky to sound like that going forward or anything. Like, it's not my ideal Cranky voice, but I kind of I don't necessarily think it's unfitting of this version of Cranky either. It's unexpected, but I think, you know, he sounds appropriately asshole-ish.
And as we all know, the asshole is the most important part of any Donkey Kong character.
Of course.
On that note, let's take our fourth call. Not to say the fourth caller is an asshole. Oh my God, no. I'm just hoping the call will be about...
Speaking of assholes.
I'm just hoping the call will be about assholes. Because that's really what I want to talk about. All right, here's hoping.
Hi, this is Indy. Long-time listener to the Kongversation and first-time caller. Looking forward to hear what you have to say about the DK redesign. Personally, I'm okay with it. I do prefer the Rare era design. And I think the top-heavy appearance to DK makes me wonder how it's going to feel to control him in a platformer game. I think the proportions are quite strange. But I think my bigger concern is I wonder if this represents a underlying philosophy within Nintendo to maybe move away from the Rare era designs. And one thing I've been hoping for a long time is a return to the Kremlings. And I hope I'm wrong, but I just wonder if this possible philosophy or underlying thought process that's led to this redesign could mean that we're less likely to see the Kremlins in future games. Or maybe I'm just being paranoid. I'd love to know what you hear.
And yeah, looking forward to the podcast.
Well, thank you for the call. Always lovely to hear a first time caller. I wouldn't worry. I think we've made the point pretty well over the course of this episode that the rare characters are here to stay. And in fact, we might even be seeing more of them than we're accustomed to, if the movie is any indication, and things like Super Mario Odyssey. But, K. Rool, I think, at the very least, K. Rool will have a role to play in Donkey Kong's future. I know for a lot of people, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate feels like a lifetime ago, and it feels disconnected from the current era that we're in, but it's not really. Whatever's been happening with Donkey Kong, more or less aligned with Ultimate development, early days, but all the same. I think that, as we said way back when K. Rool was revealed for Ultimate, that the Smash Ballot was kind of a wake-up call for some sections of Nintendo. But then, as we've also learned, there's quite a few fans, advocates for the Donkey Kong Country characters at Nintendo EPD, which is why I would really love to see what they're doing if they are working on a new Donkey Kong game, because I think where we're headed with Donkey Kong's future is kind of hybridization of all eras. And I think we can look towards some things like the theme park, like there's elements of the retro era that will definitely be sticking around. That's kind of like
for sure.
That's the baseline look for Donkey Kong's world going forward, but it's going to just evolve from there. And I think Professor Chops could maybe stick around just based on him being in a theme park, just ride that inertia.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to say with him. It's not like he's a major, like he didn't show up in the Mario movie or anything.
No, you didn't stay for the post-credits scene, Dustin. Like, after the lights come on in the theater and the next movie starts, Professor Chops pops up in the middle. I don't even remember what movies came. Dungeons and Dragons. That Dungeons and Dragons movie.
It's so post credits that it pops up in a different movie.
Yeah, like Professor Chops pops out of Chris Pine's asshole, and he's like, "Who the fuck are you?" And he's like, "Professor Chops."
Oh, you're gonna be seeing a lot of me.
Yeah, I'm glad I stayed that 6 hours in the theater waiting for, just waiting for somebody to show up, other than that Yoshi
Something's
egg.
Gotta happen.
I'm like, okay, the Yoshi egg, but where's the Donkey Kong character? Where's the Donkey Kong teaser? So I sat my ass firmly in those cushions, and I said, I am going to wait. No, I think it's one thing for Donkey Kong to be taken under the bosom of Retro Studios. And, we've heard stories, we've heard scuttlebutt about the development of the games and why they made certain decisions, and, certain figures maybe overseeing Retro's, development of the games who might have had some thumbs on the scales and said, maybe you shouldn't do this. I don't really like that. I don't think they're really going to be a factor in the next Donkey Kong game. And I think, it might surprise people how pro Donkey Kong Country Miyamoto actually is, despite all of the rumors and innuendo over the years. The downside to Nintendo being such a secretive company is that people can just make stuff up about them and it becomes common knowledge.
Yeah, it's not like they'll come out and say, actually, that's not true. I never wished to see Kiddy Kong's head on a pike.
Well, I do think it's telling that one of the things Miyamoto has refuted over the years is that he hates Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
If he did hate Donkey Kong Country, he would just keep his yap shut. And also, they wouldn't have revived Donkey Kong Country as a brand, and the theme park wouldn't be called Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, we wouldn't be seeing any of this stuff.
Yeah, so, again, like, a lot of the common wisdom of the aughts wasn't wisdom at all. It was just nonsense. And it was nonsense that fueled a narrative of really just upset Nintendo fans who were mad that Rare was no longer with them.
Right. What a time. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. And yet I look back at that era and I'm like, well, it wasn't so bad, all things considered.
We got some Donkey Kong games.
We had a Department of Education. Anyway, thank you for the call. And yeah, don't worry. I think, it might be fun to see how the Kremlings get redesigned.
I'd be down. When we first saw this new Donkey Kong model, the thing I thought first was, cool, I'm glad Donkey Kong is in a place where they can play with him a little bit. Like, you look at some of these other characters. But like Mario, for the longest time, I was like, oh, Mario is so homogenized. It is just like the bland, sterile thing. And they moved away from that going forward with like Odyssey and Super Mario Wonder. And that's awesome. I like when these characters are allowed to change.
I remember a time when Mario's art would change with every game, and I liked it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. Let's take our fifth caller, Dustin.
Hey, guys. This is Kyle. I just wanted to give my thoughts on the new DK design. I'm honestly not even sure if this is a new design, at least not permanently. I think we're jumping the gun, as none of the characters really look like their typical models and renders. To be honest, when I first saw it on the trailer, my initial instinct was this was some kind of remake of Mario Kart Super Circuit, since everybody looks closer to their pre-GameCube designs and proportions. To me, a new design only becomes official when it becomes a trend. For example, I wouldn't consider the debut of modern Sonic Adventure. I would consider it Sonic Adventure 2, as there were some slight tweaks between games, and it wasn't solidified until, I'd say, Sonic Advance the year after that, about 3 years after modern Sonic's quote-unquote official debut. In fact, if you ask a Sonic fan, the modern Sonic first appeared in Sonic Unleashed and has remained stagnant in design since 2010, to the much ire of several fans. So, I feel like we need to see it more before we can deem this as a new era DK. Personally, it does seem a bit off to me, but I think that's kind of thing that a lot of third characters get into when technology advances. You can render third. Makes things look a bit weird, but I'm sure I can get used to it. I hated King Deity's redesign, but I've accepted it now. In short, I'm apprehensive this is even a new design and not just a one-off thing, since Nintendo seems to be looser on what people can do with their designs now. But I'd be willing to accept it if this is a new standard.
Well, thank you for the call, Kyle. It is a new design. I like looking just beyond Mario Kart. It's being reflected in the merchandise. They're updating old illustrations to reflect this. Yeah. It's here to stay. Like, I think
it's the new merchandise that really sells it, because like on it, that new design for Mario Kart, like we said, it's far in the distance. It's really hard to get a perfect handle of how it's going to look. But like, if I compare the two, that doesn't necessarily look identical to this new artwork. But I feel like if this wasn't the design they were going to go with, they wouldn't have it all over all this new merchandise.
And they wouldn't be editing the old illustrations to reflect the new. So that was the selling point for me. That's really what made me realize, oh, that's what's happening. Okay. So, the only other thing I'll say about it is that, as you said, it's kind of hard to get a read on it, especially not just from the small little glimpse we get in this teaser for Mario Kart, but in Mario Kart at all, because Mario Kart's always going to be about just the expressions as a character gets hit or gets passed or it's going to be like the most overtly silly and goofy that these characters might look.
Yeah, like Donkey Kong in Mario Kart 8 doesn't look like how Donkey Kong looks in Tropical Freeze.
Yeah, of course there's similarities, but there's always going to be similarities. I think that a lot of people won't really be able to get a handle and a read on whether they like this or not until it shows up in a Donkey Kong game. As like the previous call stated, like what is it going to look like when it's actually doing some platforming, be it 2D or 3D.
Yeah.
So, like vine swinging, that kind of stuff. Like what is that going to look like? So, you know, I'm keeping an open mind about it, but I don't think Mario Kart is the end all be all. But yes, it is the new design. And I think we can say that with utmost confidence. Like you're still going to see the old design here and there. It's obviously going to be reflected in the theme parks. It's still going to be hanging around in certain aspects. But as far as new games going forward and not just like remakes of old games, I think you're going to be seeing this from here on out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this new Donkey Kong looks swinging from vines or sitting in a minecart or what have you.
Or having Professor Chops pop out of his... I don't know why that has become a reoccurring element. The ass play of this episode.
It's like from Alien.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a surprising way to see Professor Chops, though, in the new game.
Yeah, you know what? Well, maybe not now. We already predicted it.
Oh, so Professor Chops isn't in the new Donkey Kong game. It's our fault because they had this wonderful idea and then we came up with it and they're like, oh no, they're going to sue us. We have to just cut it. We're not going to sue you, Nintendo. If you want to have Professor Chops pop out of assholes, have at it. We support it.
Yeah, we're not going to take credit for that one.
No. This is like, just use our ideas. I don't care. All right. Let's take our 6th call.
Hello, this is Joy Content here, formerly known as Kitty Kong Facts. I just want to offer my own lore explanation for this change in Donkey Kong's appearance. Obviously, this Donkey Kong is so much bigger than the one we're used to, so unless Donkey Kong drank some of Chunky's potions or something, maybe it's just a different Kong. And, I mean, Kitty Kong was about as big as Donkey Kong in DKC 3, when he was only 3 years old, both in-game and in the art, so it would make a lot of sense if he grew up to be a lot bigger than Donkey Kong. So, clearly, what happened is DK just decided to send Kitty Kong to take his place in Mario Kart. It's the most obvious explanation. That's all I have to say. Welcome back, Kitty Kong. Glad to have you back.
Well, thank you for the call, Joy. You can believe whatever you want to believe, whatever makes you happy. I don't want to rain on your parade, but...
I like the theory that it's a new Kong. Like, this is Jeremy Kong.
No, so I knew that we were going to get the theory, not this theory per se, this adult Kitty Kong theory. That's new, although I would expect it from you, Joy. But, I knew we were going to get this theory because we got this theory back when Returns came out. This theory that this is another generation of Kong. They've aged up the generations yet again, and the cranky in Returns was actually the Donkey Kong of the Rare era, and that this Donkey Kong is the next generation. And like, there's always going to be people who are going to want to push that angle because it's I don't know, it's sexy to them. But my big aging is sexy. Damn it, you know,
that's true.
You're in the springtime of your life, Granny. But my thing about this, the biggest hindrance about this, right, is that the relationship between Donkey and Diddy. Like, so you're saying this is what, Diddy the second, Diddy the third, Dixie?
Yeah, they just all look identical.
Dixie the third. Like, are you saying that Diddy and Dixie had kids and then their kids are dating each other? Like, what's happening
I hate
here?
That.
Yeah. So I think we're never going to see another generational age up ever again under Nintendo's authority. I think that it was wild that it happened once. And it's wild that we saw things like Tiny aging up to be a teenager or Wrinkly dying. I don't think
that is crazy. That's wild.
I don't think you're ever going to get any significant aging of the characters again. Now, I do hope Kitty reappears at some point, and yeah, Kitty logically should be older. Dustin, of course, we have our suggestion, and Nintendo's already going to say no to our Professor Chops push. So I don't want to bring up the suggestion that Kiddy Kong is aged up to be this depressed, solitary 20-something living in a studio apartment full of cats, right? And
one step at a time.
The game, of course, would be called Kitty's Kitties, where Kitty has to take care of the studio apartment full of cats. And then the title screen, as you start the game, is that you see this figure hunched in the corner in this darkened studio apartment, and they hold up a cat and they lick the cat, and then they turn to face you, the player, and it's Kiddy Kong. And Kiddy Kong says, and then the logo comes up. Kitties, kitties. Copyright.
The theme music kicks in.
Copyright 2028 Nintendo.
You know what? As long as we don't ask them to do it, they haven't said no yet.
Right. So all we have to say is this isn't something we're asking them to do. We're just saying words in no particular order. They're just spilling out of our mouths in a really weird way that it makes it sound like we're talking about a game where Kitty raises 70 cats in a studio apartment.
Right, but purely random words.
Purely random. You know what? I'm afraid of what else we're going to say that Nintendo will then never do. So we better take our 7th call and just cut our good idea train off right here.
Good idea.
Hey, Hyle and Dustin of DK Vine. It's the Liquor Calling 20XX here, and I've got to say, it's been a long time since I've actually called the hotline, mainly due to just being busy in real life. Anyways, the new Naka AF Donkey Kong design. Honestly, I think it looks pretty good for a newish interpretation of DK. Admittedly, it might take some getting used to seeing an actual games with 3D models like the new Mario Kart and the inevitable DK Switch 2 game. I do feel that part of this could be because of DK's eyes, which, when it comes to character design rules in general, is typically the most important detail to get right, as the eyes can be seen as, quote-unquote, the gateway to one's soul, because that's what you're going to be seeing on a character, typically. Otherwise, what other design changes would you like to see, or wouldn't mind seeing on the rest of the Donkey Kong cast, like K-Rool, for example? Anyways, I will see you later. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for the call. You know, we've talked a little bit about some of the other Kongs, but yeah, we haven't really talked about any of the other cast. And, you know, I don't know if K-Rool really needs too much tweaking. I
don't think so.
You know, they might soften his features a little bit for the new Donkey Kong game. Like, I don't think he would look exactly like he does in Smash, but I really don't know. I'm not a design person, Dustin. Like, all I know is it looks like, based on the theme park at least, that they're reverting Rambi to closer to his rare design, which I love. And other than that, I don't really know. What would you say? If, like, redesign a Donkey Kong character?
I don't know. It is kind of hard to say. I think it's one of those things where, like, I might be too close to this to, like, objectively say, like pull On Guard out of the pile. And I look at him and I say, no, that's just On Guard. Leave him as is.
Perfect. Perfection. Yeah.
Yeah. The best thing I've ever seen in my life. I might not be the right person to decide, like, what should be redesigned about Kongs and what shouldn't.
Yeah, to me, it's like adding buck teeth to the Mona Lisa. Why would you do it?
Just because it's funny?
You know, bring back the Brothers Bear. I'll pull a Matt here. Bring back the Brothers Bear, but use their DKC3 SNES designs. Don't use their GBA designs. Whatever you do, don't use their GBA designs.
Please, no.
Rare could do wrong, people, and they did wrong there. They did all the Brothers Bear dirty, except Bachelor Bear, because he was brand new for that game, so who's to say?
Yeah, he looked great.
Yeah, sorry we don't have a better answer for you, but as Dustin said, I think we're too close to the source material, and like, for me, like, I think back to seeing Swanky on that poster for the movie. And then seeing Swanky, erupt in a fireball in the movie itself. I thought Swanky looked great there. And Swanky obviously looked different than he did in DKC3. But it was still recognizably Swanky. And I was just like, if that's the way he looked in the games from now on, I would be completely on board with that because it's Swanky. And I think I'm at the point with a lot of these characters where I just want them back. I just want them used again. So if
I'm not going to be too picky.
If you got to change the house style for them to make it acceptable to be used, do it. Just use them.
Yeah, that's all I really want. I mean, talking about this new DK design, I think before we saw it, I would, if you asked me what I would do to redesign Donkey Kong, again, I would just be like, I don't know, he looks great to me already. I wouldn't. But then seeing this new Donkey Kong and like all this new artwork, I'm like, oh yeah, that looks good. I think he looks really nice. It's one of those things where I really can't decide how I'll feel about it until I see it right in front of me.
For sure. Like I'm still honestly a little on the fence about it, but I can see and understand why they made this decision. And notionally, I can get behind it, even if in my heart, it's going to take a while.
Right. And it's going to be subjective no matter what. Some people it'll gel with perfectly. Some people will just flat out hate it. Some people, kind of in the middle. Some people need to warm up. It depends on the person.
Sure.
And their tastes.
Exactly. All right. Well, Dustin, we're going to take one more call and then we're going to wrap this up for now. I say for now because just in a couple weeks, we're going to be talking about the Switch 2 Direct. And any appearance Donkey Kong makes in that will then further this narrative one way or another. So, let's play our, the last call we're playing, I should say, and then, final thoughts time.
Okay.
Hey, Kongversation. This is TJ. Congrats on starting season 13. Just calling in to talk about, DK's new design. So, I want to start with, a couple years ago, there was this graphic floating around. It was kind of a Venn diagram type of color wheel image that had different mascots broken up into different categories. I remember Mario. He was the face of the charming mascots. And you had Sonic in the other corner. He was the face of the cool mascots. And you had, who else was it? It was, it was Crash Bandicoot. He was the face of the wacky mascots. And so in between each category, you had other characters like, I remember Banjo. He was kind of listed as a mix of wacky and charming. And you had, Spyro. He was kind of a mix of cool and charming and so on. But, that was a really popular graphic. But I remember in particular, it was Kremlin Campaigner who retweeted that graphic and they edited it so that Donkey Kong's face was solely in the middle. And I remember looking at that version where DK was in the middle, and I just thought, like, wow, that really looks perfect. That looks complete now. Because, that's pretty much how I would describe him. He's like a perfect blend of cool. He's got some wackiness to him, but he's just charming. He's a likable dude, Donkey Kong. And so, I remember Kremlin Campaigner's version of that graphic was really, in my eyes, the definitive version. I just thought it was on point in regards to how the other guys were represented and in terms of how Donkey Kong is represented. And so with this new design that we've seen in the Mario Kart trailer, or the Mario Kart footage from the Switch 2 reveal, I feel like designing him this way, where he's got the goofier face, he's got he's less angry looking, he's got more fat to him than muscle bulk, I feel like this kind of takes away from the coolness and pushes him a little too far into the wacky category for my liking. As a whole, it's a good design, like the new design. It's a good design if you're just trying to design a big dumb ape. But, of course, for a lot of us, Donkey Kong is a lot more than that. So, personally, I'm always going to prefer the rare version. I get that maybe they wanted him to look a little more expressive. I feel like he could have experimented and played around with his traditional design, like try to bend the brow a little more without reworking his entire body and his entire head. I feel like there should have been a middle ground before just jumping all the way to this radical old school throwback design. It's hard to call it the new design because it's essentially a throwback to the arcade DK. But yeah, I feel like the Mario movie design was a pretty happy medium. You know, he could get really expressive in that. When he had the angry brow, he looked like traditional Rare Kevin Bayless DK. But yeah, that's my. I was so close to the end of my other call, and it cut me off anyway. So I'll just call in real quick so I get a better last word. But yeah, just to reiterate, I think it's a good design, but I do prefer the traditional Kevin Bayless one. In the end, the fact that Nintendo wants to leave a bigger personal mark on Donkey Kong kind of shows how much they care for him anyway. Like, it shows that they're excited about the character, that they want him to look and feel like he's one of theirs. And so, in the end, I do think that's, you know, a good thing for Donkey Kong fans. So it says a lot about the future and how they have plans for him. So, yeah, thanks again for taking the call, and now I can wrap it up.
Well, thank you for the calls, TJ. You know, I agree that maybe you lose a little bit of the coolness factor for Donkey Kong by redesigning him, but again, Mario Kart is a very poor barometer of that, because when is the last time Donkey Kong has looked cool in a Mario Kart game?
I'd argue he's never.
I would say Mario Kart 64, maybe Double Dash.
I'd say he looks
right.
fine. I don't think he looks bad in those. I don't know if cool is the word I would use for him, though.
Yeah, he's always been in his role when he's appearing with the Mario cast. He's always been a bit of a goof. And I think the cool factor comes into play more when he's by himself with his own kind, in his elements. I think that's just always been the dichotomy of how they portray him, depending on which cast he's spending time with. And so maybe this is the poorest way to introduce this design in a game context, just seeing it in a brief snippet in a Mario Kart track. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. Just judging based on the 2D artwork we've seen of this, I think he's capable of a great variety of expressions, from cool to happy to angry to horny.
The whole gambit.
He can do it all now.
I think that is the thing. Like, I never had a problem with how he looked with the Rare design, but you do notice that trend of, well, he just does not emote very much with his eyes. And I don't think that it's something they couldn't do with that design, but it's something they didn't really do. And I wonder if it's less like, oh, he could not emote at all before and now he can, and more just it's easier for them to do. Like, they just did some tweaks to his brow to make it a little easier to visualize, a little easier to work with. Because, yeah, the fact is they just never did it much before with the thicker, annoyed brow, as Kev put it.
Yeah. So I think it's early days. And obviously we all want to jump the gun. We all want to say our piece. We all want to record a 3-hour podcast on it. But I think we have a pretty good idea. And I think back to the movie, and TJ kind of said there's a difference between the movie design and this. I don't think functionally there is. I think it's the same design, just different context, and any variances in the Mario Kart character designs is, done to the movie design to make it slightly different there, but it's still the same design. Just like the Kev Bayless Rare design would look different from game to game. But I think back to the movie, he kind of had some cool moments in the movie, or at least some, like, not suave cool, not like, oh wow, that guy farts rainbows, but like,
that's cool.
He had some moments of confidence and swagger in the movie, and moments where he, swallowed his own dick. But again, that's with the Mario cast, so it's kind of hard to, say for sure. But I do think that we're going to have a happy blend going forward, that represents sort of all eras of Donkey Kong, from the arcade era through the Rare era, through the buyout era, through the retro era. And that is just what Donkey Kong is going to be for today. Now, looking in the live stream really quick, hello March Rose, who has joined us, and Cameron, who has joined us. I'm glad Cameron joined us because we're about to discuss some of Cameron's thoughts, because I did reach out because, thinking about design-oriented or design-minded DK Vine staffers, Cameron did a whole wonderful series about the Donkey Kong characters' evolving designs on our Tumblr, back when our Tumblr page was being updated. It still exists. You can still read it. But Cameron sent me a little mini editorial. And I wanted to read these thoughts just because I wanted the extra perspective. I am not design minded. I'm dumb when it comes to art. I look at the Campbell soup cans and I'm like, is that art? I don't know. Andy Warhol says it's art, but I don't understand.
Who am I to say what is and isn't art?
I'm not really that much of a Luddite, but I still, I defer to both of you when it comes to art. So, right. Cameron said, I'm reserving full judgment until we get a better look at Donkey Kong's design, since the only look we've had of him in 3D is incredibly low resolution, blurry, and from the new Mario Kart, rather than a dedicated Donkey Kong game, a series notorious for its very scattershot track record with Donkey Kong's character model. His appearance is often not 100% reflective of how he appears in the Donkey Kong games contemporary to them, even on a good day, in an outright horror show at the worst, to which I agree completely.
Yeah.
I've long been a proponent of the Mario series 3D models adopting more parity with the 2D drawings of Nakohai. We're just botching that surname. I'm so sorry. His artwork and the art by others drawing upon it is striking, fun, and characterful. And that series is long overdue on some updates to designs that are still heavily informed by limitations from the series' early years in 3D. And if the Mario series is moving that direction, I don't think Donkey Kong's appearance, at least in Mario games, being nudged in that direction is a bad thing either. Donkey Kong's been a Mario spin-off regular since day one, but he's always looked slightly apart from the rest of the cast since Mario Kart 64, due to being a character developed for 3D first, with noticeably different design sensibilities. That said, I take issue with the opinion some have voiced that the changes to DK that we see are simply necessary to give him a greater emotional range, or those who attribute the changes entirely to better adapting Donkey Kong to Nakoai's art. This is because, as apparent by some of the artwork we've seen on the things like the Donkey Kong calendar being slightly modified from existing art, Nakoai's been drawing very rare faithful interpretations of Donkey Kong for years. He was involved in establishing the look of the cast in DK King of Swing, a game that has informed the designs of the principal DK cast in every game since, and has regularly contributed artwork of DK expressing a wide range of emotions across everything from merchandising artwork to concept drawings for the Mario movie, even a 2020 Nintendo recruitment book, all drawn with the original Bayless-style brow.
I do love that drawing of him in that book.
Yeah, it's Donkey Kong on the telephone. Oh, he talks on a telephone like I do, with his finger plugged in his other ear to block out all surrounding noise. I do that, Dustin.
Yeah, and the phone ripped off of the cord too.
I do that too, because I don't have a landline anymore. I don't want to talk
to people.
Oh, I don't really know the context of this artwork because Daisy is on the phone with Wart and some Shy Guys from Super Mario Brothers 2, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, they hang out.
I'm surprised to see Wart of all characters. No, the thing I've noticed about Nakoai's art of Donkey Kong over the years, this is me talking, not Cameron, is that he's always contributed some design flourishes from Miyamoto's sketches, from the DK94 design. So I think he's heavily informed the new design of Donkey Kong as much as Miyamoto might have done.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, this is Cameron again. All that said, even if this turns out to be exactly how DK looks from now on, even in his home series, I've been around the block enough to acclimate to character design changes a lot more drastic than this, even just within the DKU itself. Looking at you, Fox McCloud. And at the end of the day, I greatly prefer Donkey Kong looking like a big, friendly, mellowed out teddy bear than a monster that wants to eat my face.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
That's very eloquently put, Cameron. Thank you so much. Cameron said you don't have to read that verbatim, and I didn't respond, but in my head I was like, you better believe I'm reading that verbatim, buddy. No, thank you. So that's a good point. One, about Donkey Kong looking like a big mellowed out teddy bear. I think, as much as I agree with Cameron that Donkey Kong, the old design, is capable of a greater range of facial expressions than was ever given credit for. I think that's why we're seeing the tweak specifically made to accommodate it in a 3D model, because it's easier to do that in 2D art, I think, than in 3D render. Something about it. And I think just making these tweaks to it maybe makes it easier across the board.
Yeah, like, I look at even that drawing of Donkey Kong I was complimenting earlier, like, that is definitely a different emotion, a different facial expression he's making, but it's not, like, super pushed. Like, his brow still looks a little furrowed. And like I said before, I don't think it's impossible to do more expressive emotions with the old DK model, but I just wonder if part of the reason they tweaked it was it just made it a little easier. Yeah,
for sure. Cameron also brought up like the changes within the DKU self, like looking at some of the design tweaks of the DKU characters over the years, like outside of the Donkey Kong series. I like this Donkey Kong redesign a hell lot more than I like the Banjo redesign in Nuts and Bolts. And this isn't me.
For sure.
This isn't me going on a Nuts and Bolts tear. Like, I'm not as anti Nuts and Bolts as a lot of people out there. I think Nuts and Bolts is a great game. It was just, the rollout of it was just, dunderheaded. Making people think it was going to be a just traditional 3D platform, and they'd be like, actually,
just kidding. It's cars.
Like, I think Nuts and Bolts is a quality game.
Yeah,
and,
same.
The only issues with it is it was in lieu of something rather than in addition to something. But
right.
I don't like Banjo's design in that. It looks fine within the context of Nuts and Bolts, but every time you pause the game, every time you see a screenshot, every time you see that character model, I'm just like, what the hell were they thinking? No, I know some people who are at Rare then like defend it and say, it was an improvement. I don't think it was an improvement at all.
Yeah, it's one of those things where at the time I didn't really mind it, but then when you get a design, like you go to Smash Brothers next for the next design, it's really hard to go back to that Nuts and Bolts design.
I'm so happy to see the Banjo design being what it was in Smash, and just it did kind of like finally put to bed the Nuts and Bolts design. And I saw somebody on Blue Sky say that the new Donkey Kong design would actually marry quite well with the Banjo design, like the traditional Banjo design. Like they look a lot more like they're part of the same universe now. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I like to see people thinking in those terms, obviously.
Yeah.
So, whatever helps you make this transition, I say, embrace it.
For sure.
Now, what if you just absolutely hate this new design? Well, that's okay too. That is okay. Because I admit, Dustin, I'm not completely sold on this design yet. I see its attributes. I see its merits. But as I said earlier in this episode, I grew up with the Rare design. That is the era of the series that will always be my favorite, because it is the warmest part of my life from when I was a Donkey Kong fan, so like I'm willing to give this new design a shot, especially, as I said earlier, if it brings more characters out of the mothballs. If we have to redesign some of these characters to get them in use again, God, let's do it. Like, redesign
it's better than
Squitter.
not using them at all.
Redesign Squitter. You know, if you have to make Squitter a little bit less cool ass to get Squitter back in games, so be it. So be it. If you've got to have Candy dress a little bit more modestly to get Candy back, so be it. If you've got to give Bachelor Bear some STDs to demonstrate to impressionable gamers the dangers of a bed hopping lifestyle, so be it.
Yeah,
so
I mean, better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Exactly. Yeah. Matt said something on the last episode. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. He was saying that in relation to Donkey Kong Country Returns HD and any flaws that game might have. I would still say it, and he would still say it is the best version of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, or best version of Donkey Kong Country Returns on the market. And isn't it great that we have it? And I would say that about any redesigns coming to the Donkey Kong cast, Donkey Kong included. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Because, yeah, if you are a fan of a series that never ends, it's a double-edged sword. Because on one hand, you've always got something on the horizon to look forward to. Even if it takes over 11 years, you have something on the horizon to look forward to. But you inevitably come up against the change to a status quo that you favored, that you enjoyed, that you savored. The terrible thing about life is you get old and things change. People die. You move. Circumstances around you change. Life is but a series of temporary status quos for all of us. And I understand taking comfort in our fictional worlds because they are or can be unchanging. But the truth is nothing is unchanging. And we all have our favorite eras and time periods. And as Traveler of the Stars said in their plus-sized call, you can always go back and revisit those eras. That's the great thing.
They're not taking them away.
Time travel is possible, not in our own lives, but in the lives of the Kongs and the DKU denizens. You can go back and you can revisit when Donkey Kong looked like a reject Battletoads character all you want. It's there. It exists. You can hop back in a machine and go to 1994, 1995, 1999, 2010. You know, whatever you want. But I think you have to kind of let go and you kind of have to accept that things will evolve. Evolution, Dustin. Evolution was the whole point behind this episode. Things will evolve and you might not like every change, but if you want to remain a fan of something, you can go into something and say, I don't like the way this looks now. I don't like what they're doing with that, but give it a shot. Give it a chance.
Yeah, and even then, even after you've given it a chance, it still doesn't gel with you. That's fine. It's all subjective. No one has to. There's no like right, correct way for Donkey Kong to look. You don't say like this is objectively how Donkey Kong should be, and anyone else who says otherwise, guess what? You're wrong.
No, you're right. You know what the shocking thing is, Dustin? The shocking thing I realized about myself when this debate started happening was...
What is it?
I think my favorite look for Donkey Kong, my all-time favorite look for this Donkey Kong, was how he looked in 1994, before he even got the furry shenanigans, the pre-rendered fur, when he just looked like he was coated in melted plastic. That's my favorite look for this Donkey, when he had the weird, like, segmented hot dog fingers. That's my favorite look for Donkey Kong. And I know that's just because that's the Donkey Kong I fell in love with back in 1994. That's the Donkey Kong I stared at on long car trips, via instruction manuals, via Nintendo Powers, via player's guides. That's the Donkey Kong I absorbed into my DNA. And that will always be my favorite. You know how long that version of Donkey Kong lasted? 1 year. 1 year of artwork.
That was out the door.
Out the door. They improved him almost immediately. They added the realistic fur texture to him. They made his fur a little bit darker, in fact. They added the DK emblem to his necktie. To this day, I'm like, you don't really need that DK emblem on the necktie. It looked fine, just being unadorned.
Too many letters.
As the years went on, they added even fluffier fur. They added the slightest hint of small teeth. Then they added just enormous teeth. They gave him an elongated chin and neck, made him look like he had had an allergic reaction to something. They gave him huge forearms. Then they gave him the slightest hint, and then they took away the yellow or silver in his fur that was just briefly there for a second. They gave him raised nostrils. Then they gave him even more raised nostrils.
Next game, his nostrils are going to be on his forehead.
They're going to be his eyes, Dustin. He's going to breathe through his eyes.
That's impressive.
And look, it's not even his appearance. I saw his portrayal fluctuate even under Rare. Under Rare, he went from laid-back Gen X slacker with a heart of gold to a village idiot. Donkey all confused. Are you, Donkey? Because that doesn't really sound like something you would say up until this point.
Donkey all confused.
Under Nintendo, he became an aggressive dickhead in some games. He was this simpleton who just wanted toys based on Mario in other games. And then he went back to something that more or less approximated the way he was in Donkey Kong Country in other games, usually depending if Diddy was beside him. And not all of those flavors of the character were to my liking, given that I used terms like simpleton or dickhead. Might have given it away there. But I am still a fan of Donkey Kong to this day, and I understand that that's just being a fan of a character who has many authors, who has many fingers in his metaphorical pie. This isn't another sticking things in your butthole reference. Don't worry, I'm done with that portion of the podcast. Being a fan of a character that will outlive you can be difficult. There's comfort in it, but there's also your own realization that you are mortal and that things are not going to stay stagnant for you. Things are not going to continuously reflect your own childhood. That sucks, Dustin, but it's a part of getting older. So I say all this.
You just got to roll with the changes.
I say all this because you can age gracefully. Looking back, the times I felt most dour about the franchise have always historically been when we didn't really know the fate of Donkey Kong's supporting cast. I mentioned the Regal theorem earlier, which was Cameron's way of stating when Donkey Kong's going to be a dickhead or not. And that was always if Diddy was by his side. If Diddy was by Donkey Kong's side, we didn't really have to worry because it was almost impossible to be portrayed in a negative light. Because Diddy always represented Donkey Kong's better instincts.
Right.
He was Diddy Kong's mentor, and then he was Diddy Kong's best friend, his adventuring partner. And if Diddy's with him, that can only reflect kindly on Donkey Kong. And it's not a coincidence that every time they're paired together, he's more like his Donkey Kong Country self. And every time they're apart, then he starts acting more like the Donkey Kong from the arcades.
Right. I mean, I can't even imagine having Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong together and they're just both jackasses.
I mean, that might be funny a little bit, if I'm honest. If Diddy is just a little dick, he's like, I'm a little stinker, am I right?
Fuck you, Mario.
Yeah, kicks Mario just straight in the crotch and just gives him the finger. And then
what are you going to do about it?
And then he holds out his hands and somebody throws him 2 beers and he just starts chugging the beers.
You know what? This is a good Diddy Kong portrayal. I take it back.
His theme music plays, you hear the glass shatter, and he like gets up and he's like,
and it's all treated as a good thing. It's not like he's ever like the villain or the bad guy. It's like, yeah, look at this guy.
It could be like the new Joe Camel. Remember Joe Camel?
I remember Joe Camel.
I shared a image of Joe Camel with Dustin the other day for no reason. Dustin said, cool. And I was like, what's the coolest thing I know? The Camel cigarettes mascot from the 90s. I was like, yeah, you know what? Made me want to smoke.
He's the epitome of cool.
I never did start smoking, but god damn if I didn't want to start smoking when I saw that guy in the back of the TV guide.
I want to be cool like him.
Like, we know the fate of Donkey Kong's supporting cast. That is the biggest difference between now and when Jungle Beat was new. And yeah, as we've said, as we've reiterated again and again, Jungle Beat is a game we've come around on for the most part here at DK Vine. I see it as a very quality game and actually very innovative and creative. And in a lot of ways, a game that does honor Donkey Kong in a lot of ways that might fly under the radar. But my biggest issue that I had at the time was that Diddy wasn't in it. What is the fate of Diddy? What is the fate of Dixie? What is the fate of the other Kongs or the Rare era characters or even the characters coming after Rare, like the Payon characters, the retro characters? Like, I've got to know that Donkey Kong supporting cast, which is honestly like the biggest reason why I am a Donkey Kong fan, no offense to Donkey Kong, is that supporting cast. The supporting cast that I find so interesting and beloved, but also just always mellow Donkey Kong out. You know, a redesign that harkens back a bit more to the arcade era aside, and calls that suggest this could be an adult Kiddy Kong aside. This is clearly still the same Donkey Kong, hanging out with his buds, and there's no question this time around that those buds will be sticking around. His buds, and if Funky's involved, his buds, if you catch my drift.
Hell yeah.
But, you know, Donkey Kong's new design does look a little bit more like young Cranky. But guess what? I just said you gotta age gracefully. It happens to the best of us, Dustin. You feel like you're gonna be young forever, and the things you love are always gonna stay the same. And then you wake up one dark January day, you look at yourself in the mirror, and then you see your father staring back at you. Or your grandfather who raised you like a father. We'll see what Miyamoto has to say about that.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.